umutima sinzi niba ari ubwenge buke cyangwa ari ugucanganya ikigwa. Umutima urambwira ati se nuhunga urahunga wambaye isengeri n'akabutura bararanye, ntihaguruka urebe umwenda wambare. Ndahaguruka ntora agapira ndambara. Kujya maze kukambara wandashe nzakeka ko yari inyuma yanje, ariko ndeba ibyo nariko nkora yahise andasa ngo hirya gatoya iruhande rwa muramu wanje. Ndamubwira ngo barandashe, naho ndi kumubwira gutyo yarangije. Ndakomeza ndamuhamagara ntiyanyumva. Mpamagara umwana bari bajyamanye numva yaranyitabye. Mbona kumenya ko papa wiwe atari mu mwuka, ariko numvaga igitima cyo kiri gutera cyane. Umwana twari tujyamanye njya nkeka ko wandashe ariwe wamurashe, kuko igihe nagiye gushaka umwenda yarankurikiye. Nza ntekereza ngo igihe urusasu rwantereye hirya yaje ankurikiye nabo baramurasa, kuko ntabwo nongeye kumva yishaganye. Mpamagara mukuru wanjye ngo namfashe, nagwiriye urutugu barashe simbasha guhaguruka. Igihe bavuze ngo dusohoke nkomeza mubwira ngo naza mfashe, arahaguruka afata umwana, abana yarajyamanye n'abana babiri ngo agire ngo anyegure, nabo bavuze induru, ariko aramagurutsa akora ku bana, asanga abana babiri aribo bapfuye na papa wabo. Barangiza baravuga ngo abantu bareke guhira mu mahema musohoke, kuko abicanyi bari bavuze ngo amasasu yaheze, ngo nimuzane ngo esanse duturire, ngo n'abakomeretse n'abakiri mu mwuka ngo barahita bahira mu hano. Ababyeyi baravuga ngo mushirire hanze, mwe guhira muri aya mahema. Turasohoka, mukuru wanjye adushira imbere. Ngo tuvuge ngo tugende, mfata nanjye umukuru wari wasigaye muri bo mushira imbere yaje, kuko nari nabibonye ko bofre yapfuye n'abandi bana babiri, tubasiga aho ngaho. Ngo ngere imbere hagati muri hallway, ndebye ku ruhande mu buryo bwanje, mbona muhorana mandevu yapfuye na mama wiwe, umudamu nawe afite abandi bana basigaye, nibo twashoreranye. Ngo tugere ku muryango, basanga Nyabeye. Mbwira Nyabeye ngo hoje tuhunge Nyabeye. Nyabeye yaranga ngo ntagenda, ngo mama wiwe yapfuye, ngo ntamusiga. Mbona atanyumvishije ndahushuka, ngo ndebe imbere yanjye ku muryango, mbona aho bari bashinze mashini gani. Nahise mpindukiza umutwe cyane, nanga kwireba kabiri. ariko njya gusohoka mbona mukuru wanjye asigaye inyuma n'abana bose, sinamenye ukuntu nicaye mpeka Aline. Mfata igitenge nari nakweze ngiye gusohoka, ngira ngo ndamujisha ngo muheke neza, kirananira kijana ku rutugu. Aline ndamubwira ngo afate cyane akomeze, je bandashe simbasha kumufata. Mfata poraje imbere, pete Aline turagenda, naho natandukaniye na mama wabo, naho nzu kwanjye, naho hunga kwiba n'abandi babiri. Tugera inyuma y'amahema, ibyatsi birantega, nikubita hasi mpetse Aline. Imana iramfasha, sinamenye uko nabigenje, ndahaguruka ndicara, mbwira Aline ngo nanje mu mugongo, aho niho nza nibuka uburyo namuhetse. Ndashima Imana ko yampagurukije aho hantu sinapfira, ngo abana narunganye babura aho baje. Ndasubira nshorera Polo ajya imbere, turahunga tuhungira mu bihuru. Hirya hari umwobo, muri uwo mwobo nanone bari badukurikije amasasu. Ababyeyi bakavuga ngo mwike muri uwo mukuku, ngo amasasu araza duce hejuru, ngo ntabwo ari bujye mu mukuku. Ariko kubera ko nari nkiri muto, nta bwenge nari mfite wo kwibwiriza ngo cya gitenge basi ngo cihambire cyangwa umbwire umuntu ngo ampambire. Ubwo nahuriyeho na Nyamukesha, nabo bamurashe na mama wiwe na musaza wiwe. Babona ngenda arashitse, havuze induru ngo ab'iwabo bashize. Noella baraje naho ngo yahiye, ngo bamurashe, avuga byinshi ngo ab'iwabo bashize. Babana nahunganye barambwira ngo bagize imbeho. Mfata gitenge nari nahunganye, tujyama hasi ko turi batatu, ndakibororosa. Hagize umwanya haza imodokari ngo bakomeretse ngo nimuze ngo turi abanyu twaje kubatabara, ari kugenda bacana, bari bacanye amatara maremare y'imodoka. Ndibaza ati se ko babahamagara inkomeri, aba bana ndabashira nayunganye, tazi mama wawe yagiye, nzi ko nasize papa wabo byarangiye. Negera papa waziraje, namubonye ari hano, ndamubwira ngo aba bana ni abaramu, mu gitondo nibuca ubaheze se wa Jori, ushake papa wa Jori ubamuhe. Sinzi ko papa waziraje azayibuka. Siga aba bana ahandi, ndagenda nurira imodoka batujyana kwa muganga. Ariko tugeze kuri santere nsanga ibitanda byashize, njyama hasi. aho nari njyamye hasi numva ngize imbeho nyinshi mu mubiri, noneho ya maraso atangira yari yankwiriye cyane hose. Mbona Nginera araje afite ikirengeti, ndamubwira nti Ngine wanyororoshe ico kirengeti ko mfite imbeho. Arandeba ahita mpunga, mbona arasohotse aragenda. Naje kuzamubaza nyuma ati se ko nakubwiye ngo unyororoze ikirengeti ukampunga Ngine? Arambwira ngo yabonye ukuntu nari meze, ngo aravuga ngo nashiraho ico kirengeti ngo ndahita ncikana, ngo azahora avuga ngo niwe wanyishe. Ndamubwira ati ndakubabariye, gusa nakigusabye nari nkayuye. Amabasa baraje baradutwara kwa muganga, badukura mu Gatumba batujana mu mujyi. Nuriye mu modokari nicarana na Kambaza. Umuntu wa mbere yambikije arambwiye ngo Asikofu yapfuye, ngo niko ndi kubyiyumvamo. Ndambwira nikomera. Turagenda none tugeze i Bujumbura ku bitaro bita Rwagasore, dusanga huzuye abantu bose, benshi bari hasi. Uwo mwanya wose nari nkiri nkomva, ndava nduha amaraso arahagarara yonyine. Bagiye kunkuraho ya sengeri nari nambaye n'akagapira bariko barinda gutema inyama, bagatema n'imyenda byose kugira ngo babinkure. Naho sinakabimenyaga ko nagize n'ikibazo mu mutwe. Sinamenya nimba ari urusasu cyangwa se nimba ari fragment yantemye, intema mu mutwe mu ruhande rw'ubumoso. Amaraso nayo yanyuzuye mu maso. Mbona kumenya impamvu Ngineri yampunze. Hageze nka 4:00 5:00 za mu gitondo, nabonaga bwakeye, baraza baradufata badutwara ku bitaro byo kwa Rujanti. Tugereyo umuganga arandeba, ari umuzungu, arambwira ngo uyu mwana turamuca ukuboko. Ndarira cyane. Ngira umuvandimwe twari kumwe ni Rumenga ariha, ndamubwira ngo ntumve iruhande, kuko numva iruhande baranca kuno kuboko. Ndashimira Rumenge ko atamvuye iruhande. Habe mu ijoro baradutera muri bya bitaro nanone. Twaharaye kabiri, baraza barahadukura, ariko twaryamaga hasi ku mbaho, nta kamatora, nta. Uko turi kuribwa mu bisebe niko turi kubabazwa naho tujyamye. Baje kuhadukura badushana muri Rohero, niho batuvuye. Ariko tuhageze umudokiteri aravuga ngo uyu mwana iyo bamurashe umutsi, ngo kandi we ntago yigiye ibintu by'imitsi, ngo aravura abarashwe amagufwa, ngo ariko ngo uyu mwana bamushakira aho aje. Nabaye muri ibyo bitaro umwaka urenga bavura igisebe gusa. Nagiye kuzavamo gusa baravuye igisebe nta kindi. baje kunkorera dosiye ngo zaje kuvugwa muri Nairobi, ariko sinagirirwa ayo mahirwe yo kugenda. Nkura aho ngaho, igihe navuye mu bitaro nsubira kwa mukuru wanjye ujya twari turi kumwe. Ariko nsanga naragize ikibazo, sinamenya ko ari ikibazo nagize, kuko nanone namusanze mu nkambi, niho yari ari sitiye hajya mu Ngagara bahazi. Naryama ijoro ryafata nkananirwa kuryama, nkumva za nduru, kuko ni mu ihema nkabona nanone baduteye. Naje kuzagenda kwa Pasiteri Libe, njyenyine ndibwiriza ndavuga reka ngende mva aha nta buzima mfite. Ngo ngere kwa Pasiteri Libe ndaryama kwe, ariko napfa kumanuka nagera mu gahita mbona ba bantu kandi baragarutse. Nza kugiriramo nanone ibyago bayitwibiramo, noneho numva mbaye umusazi mu mutwe, numva ubwenge bwanje burashize. Ndavuga ati ibyo natekerezaga koko ni ibi, baje kwidutereramo kandi. Nafashe igihe ngasenga, ntangira kwisenga, ndavuga ati ubu si ubuzima. Imana iradufasha, turahava, turaza tugera hano. Tukimaze kugera hano baratangira baramvura, barambwira ngo iyo nja kuza kare nko mu mwaka wa mbere cyangwa bikiba, ngo bari guhita bankorera surgery imwe cyangwa zibiri bikarangira. Ariko bambaza inshuro 4 zisanga izindi 3 bari barambaze mu Burundi. Bashizemo imipira mu mubiri. Iyo mipira yamazemo amezi 7, ariko hari igihe nagezeho numva ubuzima buranze, ndavuga ngo nsingirize icuma ngo nikate njyenyine. Ariko ndashima Imana ko yankijije, yampinduriye ubuzima. Ngo mare gukira barambwira ngo ninjye ku ishuri. Mw'abantu nicaraga mu ishuri kujya umwarimu ari kwigisha nkabona gusa ibyabaye mu Gatumba aribyo biri kunza mu maso, nkananirwa kwiga. Urakagira gutyo, hariho n'abantu bazabicara bakabwira umuntu ibintu byinshi batazi ikibazo wowe ufite. Ariko ndashima Imana ko byakishize. Imana yaramfashije birashira, ndiga ibyo biba birahavuye. Imana yagize neza, nzahora nyishima ku bacikacumu bose yarakoze. Ba bana twacikanye icumu barakuze, Imana yaratwubakiye, njye na Paul. Imana yamuhaye umutware mwiza, yarakoze, yaduhaye umugisha duheza abana 4. Paul na Imana iramwubakira, imuheza umudamu mwiza, ubu afite umwana w'umukobwa. Yaduhinduriye amateka. Aline na Yvonne na Alex barize barangije masters zabo. Imana yabwe icubahiro. Mukomere mwese.
Thank you so much. Just want to say briefly about what Joyeuse said. Her name is Joyeuse Mbabazi. As she said, she is a Gatumba survivor. She lost her brother-in-law and his 2 kids in the attack. She was injured on her head and on her right arm. She was in the hospital for more than 1 year, and God have done wonders since then. Now she is a mother of 4 kids, 4 wonderful kids, and she's serving the community. Thank you, Joyeuse.
Thank you so much. Now we're going to continue with more testimonies. We're going to invite our brother Olivier Ruteramirwa to come and give his testimony as well. Thank you for your patience.
Mwiriwe. Iyo tugeze kuri uyu munsi biragora cyane kugira ngo twongere twibuke biriya bihe bikomeye twanyuzemo, ariko ndagira ngo mbwira abacikacumu bagenzi banje mwihangane mukomere. Ubwicanyi bwa Gatumba bugabuye mu bice. Igice cya mbere ni igice cya rusange dusangiye bari mu Gatumba. Igice cya kabiri ni abantu babashije kugirwaho n'ingaruka za jenoside yabaye mu Gatumba. Barimo abavuye kuvuga aha, bagendana igisebe ndetse babuze n'ingingo. Ngiye kubabwira ubuhamya. Nitwa Olivier Rutaramirwa Sekarore, ndi mvukira ya Minembwe ahandi kw'Imishasho, niho navukiye, niho nakuriye. Ubuzima bw'ibanze niho nabutangiriye. Mu gihe kitari gito twisanze Uvira, igihugu cyacu dufite uburenganzira bwo kubamo. Muri 2003 twari dutuje nk'abandi bose b'Abanyekongo, ngo 2004 intambara iza kwaduka iturutse muri Bukavu. Ikibazo kibaye muri Kongo buri gihe gitewe n'impamvu za politike cyangwa gitewe n'impamvu z'abantu ku giti cyabo, umunyamurenge aba ku mwanya wa mbere wo gushakishwa kugira ngo yicwe. Niko byatugendeye 2004 mu kwezi kwa kane kwa gatanu hari intambara yadutse iturutse Bukavu, aho twari turi Uvira dutangira kugira ikibazo cyo kubaho. Ikibazo buri wese yabonaga ko ari ikibazo. Ntibyatinze bigeze mu matariki ya mbere y'ukwezi kwa gatandatu 2004, dutangira kwigira inama yo guhunga. Kubera ko ari amateka y'ubwicanyi tubamo ya buri gihe, ntibyatinze twafashe iyo gahunda yuko tugomba guhunga kugira ngo turebe ko twaramuka kabiri. Uwo mwanzuro numva ko wari mwiza, ko twari tugikeneye kubaho. Igice cya mbere cyatangiye kugenda ku matariki nka 6, tariki 7, 8, ndetse hari n'abari bagiye mbereho. Njyewe nagiye mu ciciri cya nyuma ku itariki 9 z'ukwezi kwa gatandatu. Nibwo nambutse urugenzi rwo kuva muri Uvira ugera mu Gatumba, kuba hazi ni urugenzi rugufi cyane. Ariko kuva kuri Murongwe ukagera kuri douane byari ko bisa nko kugenda urugendo rw'icumweru, kubera umubabaro twahuriraga nawo mu nzira. Iyo watambukaga byari bitutsi, kwari ukunyagwa, ariko ukareba ko watambuka utitaye ku bitutsi, utitaye ku kuba wanyazwe. Abantu benshi baratambutse, naje kubw'amahirwe kuri zo tariki za nyuma za kwambuka, nsanga abandi bari bamaze kugera mu Gatumba, barashitse. Twakirwa nk'impunzi, ko impunzi zakirwa natwe twarabikorewe. Mu kwa gatandatu kose kurarangira turaho, dufashwa iby'ubuhunzi mu kwezi kwa 7. Ariko mu bihe byo kuba muri iyo nkambi dutegurwa ko ubuzima bwa Gatumba ari ubuzima buhora ku isasu, harabungera aho hafi. Dutegurwa ko nitwumva isasu tutagomba kuzagira ikibazo icyo ari cyo cyose. Nubwo buzima bw'abaturage bo mu Gatumba. Ntibyatinze, byakomeje kuba. Noneho rimwe na rimwe amasasu akavuga, ariko atari cyane, tukaryama tukabona burakeye. Tuba muri ubwo buzima ngo bije kugereza mu kwezi kwa 8. Sinamubona, kandi mu by'ukuri ntari ko mparura, ntari ko ndeba. Umutima umbwira ko atahagurutse ngo agende. Ndasubira kweginda hasi, uwo muntu agihagaze akiyarasa, ndagenda naho yarari gerageza gufata ukuboko mbona ntahayishaganya. Noneho ngerageje nko kugira ngo nkwege n'amaboko yombi mpurirana n'amaraso mu gituza. Yari afite akana kari gafite nk'umwaka n'igice, kari kakiri mu gituza cya nyina, mu mabere ya nyina. Yaraje, ndashima Imana kuko Imana itazibura ukwikira. Uwo mwana yanaje ari hano, yitwa Lazare. Ngerageje kumukwega mbona ntibigishobotse kuko nari mpuriranye n'icyo rugete rw'amaraso. Mfata uwo mwana, kana gatoya, ngafata n'ukuboko kw'imoso, nabanje kugerageza kugira ngo mukwege n'ukuboko kw'indyo, mbona ntibishobotse, biba ngombwa ko musiga. Ariko mfata uwo mwana aba ariwe nsohokana. Kubwo amahirwe tubona turarokotse. Umubabaro ukomeye cyane ku bacikacumu ba jenoside yakorewe mu Gatumba wabaye mu gitondo bukeye, kuko ubwo twaraswaga mu by'ukuri uwari ufite akabaraga, wari ufite akenge akiruka, nubwo tutari tuzi iyo tuhaye tuja, ariko wari kuvuga ngo reka niruke nkira, wibwira ko n'abandi bashobora kuba bakize. Ariko mu gitondo niho twagize umubabaro ukomeye. Abari bagifite imbaraga batari barashwe, nk'aba bavuye kuvuga aha, bari bamaze kugera mu bitaro, bo buriya ntibabonye ibyabaye mu gitondo kuko bari bamaze kuja mu bitaro, kandi benshi muri aha ngaha ndababona. Ariko kuba babashije gusubirayo bakabona ibyabaye, niwo mubabaro wiyongereye kuruta uwo twarashwe mu ijoro. Twarashitse dusanga abantu twari kumwe, cyane cyane nko ku muvandimwe wacu, mukuru wacu twakundaga cyane, Gasosi. Ijoro ryo kuraswa twari kumwe, kuba tamuzi yari imfura, yarazi kubana, yarazi kuganira. Yari yatuganirije, turaseka uko dushoboye. Mu gitondo hagera wasanga, kubera ko twagendaga tuvuga tuti iyi ni shitingi yabo, zimwe zari zahiye zari zashize. Wareba umuntu ukuntu yabaye, icyo nacyo kiba ikindi kibazo twahuye naco. Umuntu yari ko atwikwa n'iyo essence, agashirira mu buryo yikunja, ukabura uko wabivuga. Icyo cyabaye ikindi kibazo twahuye naco ku bacikacumu, ku bantu batari bagizweho n'ingaruka z'isaso, kubona byabishirirwa mu gitondo. Umuntu wari uzi, mwabazanya mukavuga ngo yashobora kuba ari runaka. Habaye ubushishozi, ariko hashobora kuba harabaye no gushira mu izina ritari ryo kubera ukuntu bari babaye. Abantu barashiririye, ukabura forume y'umuntu, mu buryo ibishirirwa byose byari bimeze cyo kimwe. Icyo cyatubereye umutwaro, cyatubereye intimba. Jenoside yakorewe abanyamulenge mu Gatumba, iyo tubyibutse, benshi basa n'abagendana ihahamuka, kandi birumvikana n'ibyo babonye, n'intimba bagendana. Inshuti bavandimwe, bacikacumu bagenzi banje, twagambaniwe byo kwicwa ndetse kugira ngo turangire, ariko ntitwarangiye, turacariho. abakiriho ikintu cyakorwa kimwe ku mwanya wa mbere ni iki cyo kwibuka. Iyo uhuye n'abantu bari hariya mu Gatumba baje kwibuka, wongera ugakomera. Iki kintu muzakizirikana. Nimba ari ikintu cyahorahoza umucikacumu, nubwo umuntu watogarurwa, ariko kuza kwifatikanya nawe muri uyu munsi ni intambwe ya mbere yo kumukiza. Icya kabiri, nuko tukwiriye kuzirikana bino bintu bitari hano gusa. Umunsi umwe ariya magufwa ari mu Burundi tukazayatahisha mu gihugu cyacu. Abacikacumu ntekereza ko ari cyo gihe twagira agaciro ko kwibuka abacu turi mu mudendezo. Nubwo abacu batazagaruka, ariko ikintu gikomeye twabakorera ni ukubibuka, kandi bizakunda tukabibukira iwacu, kandi ibyo bizakorwa natwe abacikacumu, bizakorwa n'abanyamulenge. Gatumba ivuzwe yibutsa amateka akomeye y'ahandi henshi hapfiriyemo abantu, ariko nubwo bimeze gutyo ntabwo twashize, turacariho. Ndangiza, uyu ni umugambi wari wateguwe ku rwego ruri hejuru. Abantu bavuye i Congo babaye mu Burundi, bari b'Abarundi. Mbere yuko abantu baje gushingurwa, habaye ijya onibe yahabaga kwikwiriye kugenda ishaka. Hari abantu babuze, ndetse banabasomye, bamwe abantu barabuze, bari babuze. Abantu batekereza ko wenda ho babajanye bakabicira nzira. Jewe nuriye itrack ya kamyo imwe y'abantu ba onibe, kuko habaga onibe, twurira tuja muri kote za Congo kugira ngo tugende tureba nimba iyo baturutse, nimba hari n'abantu twabona. Kubwa amahirwe make nta muntu twabonye woba wiciwe cyangwa woba wakiri muzima, ko hari abantu bavuga ko wenda boba bagiye kwihisha muri biriya byatsi, ariko ntabo twabonye. Ariko inkuro iba iza kutwica yavuye muri Congo, bitari ibyo gushakisha. Gitero kinini cyane, twagiye n'imodokari ahantu hanyuze abantu. Iyo modokari ya onibe niyo twari mu niyo nzira nyine yanyuraga, ryari barabara. Nubwo Congo ikomeza kudukorera jenoside, ni yacu, tuzoyibamo kandi tuzayibanamo. Bacikacumu mukomere, mwihangane, ntabwo twafire gushira. Murakoze.
Thank you so much. As he said, his name is Olivier Sekarore Rutaramirwa. Starting, he was talking about how there were military conflict in Bukavu, and that caused people from Uvira to flee the city and go to Gatumba. After a few months, the refugee camp was attacked. He mentioned that he lost his sister-in-law, Nyamatungo Seruhungu, and his brother Gasosi Erest. He talked about how he escaped. It was a long message. He sent his condolences to all survivors. He concluded urging everyone to remember and keep honoring our loved one. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madame Jolie. In this moment, allow me to welcome Pastor Ryan Flum, the pastor of Christian Community Church, to give a message of comfort. Thank you so much.
interpret? Okay, yeah, that'd be wonderful. Great. So I'm going to give him a minute to get a microphone to interpret. Yes. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. So it is my privilege, and I am humbled
numva ntewe iteka kandi nshishwe bugufi
to be invited to be here to share with this day of grief and this day of remembrance.
kugira ngo nshobore gusangira namwe muri uyu munsi w'umubabaro n'agahinda no kwibuka.
And I realize we are a little behind time, so I'm going to make it a little bit briefer.
ndabona yuko turi inyuma mu masaha ndagerageza kuvuga amagambo make.
But I want to get to the heart of the matter as I see it.
ariko ndashaka kugira ngo ngere ku kibazo, ku muzi w'ikibazo cyangwa ku mutima w'ikibazo.
So one day Jesus is walking along with his disciples.
umunsi umwe Yesu ari gutambuka n'intumwa ziwe,
And a man comes to him whose daughter is very, very sick.
umugabo umwe araza aramwegera wari ufite umwana w'umukobwa wari urwaye cyane.
And in fact, on the way to help her, she passes away.
mu gihe Yesu yagomba kujya kumufasha umugabo umwana arapfa.
But Jesus heals her up from the grave.
ariko Yesu aramuzura.
And so we see that God is compassionate.
aho rero tubona ko Imana ari nyembabazi,
He's merciful.
ko ari nyembabazi kandi umutima w'imbabazi,
He suffers alongside each one of us.
kandi ikababarana natwe mu rugendo rwacu aho ari hose.
But his miracles also show us
ariko kandi ibitangaza byiwe bitwereka yuko
that little girls are not supposed to die.
ko abana bato b'abakobwa batagomba gupfa.
GATUMBA is not broken,
isi ntabwo yagomba kuba ijanjaguritse.
and genocide is not supposed to happen.
Jenoside ntiyakagombye kubaho.
Now, the ABANYAMULENGE people, you have seen horrific things.
mwebwe abanyamurenge mwabonye ibintu bidafite izina, ibintu bibi.
But here's what I have learned about you.
ariko reba ikintu nize kuri mwebwe.
You are people who, just like Jesus,
muri abantu nka Yesu bwiwe,
just like healing up this little girl,
nkuko yakijije wa mukobwa,
you are bringing the life of heaven to this earth.
ko murazana ubuzima bw'ijuru muri iyi si.
And I see it in your resilience.
mbibonera mu buryo mu kwihangana kwanyu no gukomera kwanyu.
And I see it in your courage.
mbibonera mu mbaraga zanyu.
And I see it in your faith.
kandi mbibonera no mu kwizera kwanyu.
And the ABANYAMULENGE people have added so much to our church.
kandi abanyamurenge hari bazanye ibintu byinshi cyane ku itorero ryacu
And this city.
ndetse n'uyu mujyi wacu.
Here's what I want to leave you with.
reba ibyo ngiye kubasigira.
You honor the people who have died.
muri kwibuka muhesha icyubahiro abantu bapfuye.
These senseless deaths. These senseless deaths.
bapfuye urupfu rudafite isobanuro, urupfu
When you bring heaven to earth.
mu gihe muzanye ijuru ku isi.
And I want you to recognize something that I think you already know.
ndashaka kugira ngo mumenye kino kintu nibaza ko musanzwe muzi.
But you have been refugees physically in your past.
mwabaye impunzi mu buzima bwanyu mu mateka yanyu.
But now we are together in a land that is full of spiritual refugees.
ariko ubu ngubu turi kumwe mu gihugu aho twese cyuzuye abo nakwita impunzi bo mu buryo bw'umwuka.
People who feel lost.
abantu basa nkaho bazimiye.
People who feel empty.
abantu basa nkaho bafite bari byo babuze.
And because of the strength that you have gained through your suffering,
kubera imbaraga mwavomye biciye mu bibazo mwaciyemo,
God has something for you to give.
hari icyo Imana ifite ikintu yabahaye kugira ngo mutange.
In this land, yours and mine.
muri buno butaka muri kino gihugu cyacu twese.
So keep bringing the joy.
mukomeze muzane umunezero.
Keep bringing the Holy Spirit.
mukomeze muzane umwuka wera.
Keep showing the world what it is to suffer.
kandi mukomeze kwereka isi insobanuro yo kubabara.
But to suffer in a way that makes you more merciful.
ariko ukubabarwa gutuma nawe ugira imbabazi.
And people of justice more and more every day.
kandi abantu bagashaka ubutabera ku munsi kurushaho.
And may the people of Congo
eka abantu bo muri Congo,
specifically the people of South Kivu,
cyane cyane abantu bo muri Sud Kivu,
the Banyamulenge people all over that region.
abanyamurenge batuye muri kara karere kose,
May God give you justice,
reka Imana ibahe ubutabera,
and may God give you peace.
Imana ibahe amahoro.
And we look forward together
Tukomeje kwifuza kubana namwe
to the day that God will restore all things,
kugira ngo Imana izasubiza hamwe ibintu, izasanura ibintu byose,
and He will heal all brokenness.
kugira ngo ikize imitima imenetse yose.
It is my blessing to know all of you.
Numugisha kuri njye kubamenya mwese.
Please, if there is ever anything I can do, our church can do,
Nimba hari ikintu twe twakora, ngewe nakora, itorero ryacu ryakora,
reach out and let me know.
ubimbwire.
We love you.
Turabakunda.
Blessings.
Murakoze, Imana ibahe umugisha.
Thank you, sir.
Before we continue on this program, let me invite the musician to give us one song.
Yes. Humura sinagutaye, humura sinakwibagiwe, mu cyimbo cy'amarira nkuzana indirimbo. Humura sinagutaye, humura sinakwibagiwe, mu cyimbo cy'umwijima nkuzaniye umucyo. Humura sinagutaye, humura sinakwibagiwe, mu cyimbo cy'amarira nkuzaniye indirimbo. Humura sinagutaye, humura sinakwibagiwe, mu cyimbo cy'umwijima nkuzaniye umucyo. Amaraso yo mu gatumba aravuga nkumva, amaraso yo mu minembwe aravuga nkumva, amaraso yo mu bibogobogo aravuga nkumva. Humura sinagutaye, humura sinakwibagiwe, mu cyimbo cy'amarira nkuzaniye indirimbo. Humura, humura sinagutaye, humura, humura sinakwibagiwe, mu cyimbo cy'umwijima nkuzaniye umucyo.
Thank you so much, singers. Pour le moment, nous allons accueillir le professeur, pasteur Paul Moussafiri. professeur, pasteur et maître Paul Moussafiri, ministre honoraire de la RDC, ministre honoraire de l'agriculture, de la pêcherie et de l'élevage. Il fut aussi vice-ministre de l'Intérieur. Bienvenue, monsieur le ministre honoraire. We are welcoming former Minister of Agriculture, Fisheries and Livestock of the DRC, an attorney, a prosecutor, a professor of university, but also a man of God.
Merci beaucoup
Murakoze cyane
pour votre accueil.
kutwakira.
Je suis quelque peu bouleversé
Numva nsa n'ubabajwe cyangwa
après les témoignages qu'on a écoutés ici,
nyuma yo kumva ubuhamya twumvise hano,
après un message puissant de cet homme de Dieu qui vient de parler.
nyuma y'ubu butumwa message ubutumwa bukomeye buvuye ku mukozi w'Imana umaze kuvuga,
Je suis quelque peu perdu.
numva nkaho nsa n'uwatakaye.
Mais je voudrais prendre le courage et partager quelque chose avec vous.
Ariko numva ngomba gushaka amagambo make y'ibyo mvugana namwe uyu munsi.
Je voudrais que si vous pouvez oublier tout ce que je vais dire,
Ndashaka ko naho mukwibagirwa ibyo byose nza kuvuga,
retenez ceci.
muze gufata kino kimwe gusa.
Jésus pleure avec ceux qui pleurent.
Yesu arirana n'abarira.
Alors si vous êtes en train de pleurer,
Nimba uno munsi muri kurira,
dites-vous, Jésus pleure avec moi.
uvuga uti Yesu arirana nanjye.
Je vous prie, si vous pouvez oublier tout ce que je dirai,
Ndabasaba nimba muza kwibagirwa ibindi byose navuze,
retenez ça.
ibi ngibi mubigumane.
Et ceci, je tire ça de la Bible.
Ibi ngibi mbikura muri Bibiliya.
Le texte est trouvé dans le livre de Jean, chapitre 11, le verset 35.
Muyakura muri Yohana igice cya 11 umurongo wa 35.
Dans ce texte,
Muri icyo gitabo
quelque chose de très important
hari ikintu cyangombwa cy'agaciro
que j'ai trouvé,
nasanzemo,
c'est que c'est le verset le plus court de la Bible.
nasanze arizo verse cyangwa murongo wa Bibiliya mugufi wa mbere ubaho.
Il dit simplement Jésus pleura.
Haravuga ngo Yesu ararira.
C'est ça tout le verset.
Nuwo murongo gusa.
Mes frères et sœurs,
Bene data bavandimwe,
mesdames et messieurs, vous qui êtes ici,
bene data mwese muri hano, abagabo n'abagore muri hano,
je vais pendant un court moment
muri uyu mwanya muto nahawe
vous dire mon sentiment personnel.
ngiye kubabwira uko ngewe numva amarangamutima yanjye.
Mais avant ça, permettez-moi de remercier
Ariko mbere yabyo munyemerere nshimire
les organisateurs de cette cérémonie
abateguye iyi gahunda,
qui m'ont fait l'honneur
bampaye iteka
de venir pour prendre la parole.
kugira ngo nshobore kuza ngira icyo mvuga.
J'accueille véritablement cette invitation avec humilité,
Ubwo butumire nabwakiranye guca bugufi
mais
kwinshi,
je la reçois aussi comme une responsabilité.
ariko nabyakiranye n'inshingano, numvise ari inshingano mpawe.
Il n'est pas facile de parler de ce que la violence nous a arrachés.
Ntabwo byoroshe kuvuga hejuru yabo ubwicanyi bwadutwambuye.
Il n'est jamais facile
Ntabwo byoroshe
de rouvrir les blessures d'une mémoire qui demeure encore vivante.
kugurura ibikomere cyangwa gufungura ibikomere by'amateka akiri mashasha cyangwa akiri mu buzima bwacu.
Mais il est parfois plus douloureux encore de se taire.
Ariko kandi birababaje cyane guceceka, kutagira icyo uvuga.
Car le silence peut devenir le plus grand allié de l'oubli.
kuko guceceka kutavuga nibyo bishobora kuba umufatanyabikorwa ukomeye wo kwibagirwa.
Et l'oubli est souvent le premier pas
kandi kwibagirwa ni intambwe ya mbere
vers la répétition des tragédies.
intambwe ya mbere iganisha mu gusubiramo ayo mateka mabi.
La Bible nous enseigne
Bibiliya iratwigisha
que Dieu lui-même n'oublie pas
ko Yesu bwiwe atibagirwa
les victimes de l'injustice.
Imana itibagirwa abagiriwe nabi abarenganijwe.
C'est ce que Psaume chapitre 9 le verset 13 nous dit.
Nibyo Zaburi igice cy'icyenda umurongo wa 13 tubwira.
Il est écrit car il venge le sang et se souvient des malheureux.
Kuko ngo ahorera amaraso kandi
Il n'oublie pas leurs cris.
ntiyigera yibagirwa umorogo wawe cyangwa amarira yawe.
Si Dieu n'oublie pas,
niba Imana itibagirwa
son peuple
twebwe ubwoko bwiwe
non plus ne doit pas oublier.
ntitugomba kwibagirwa.
Se souvenir est donc un devoir.
ni ukuvuga ngo kwibuka ni inshingano cyangwa ni devoir.
C'est un acte de fidélité.
ni igikorwa cy'ubwizerwa.
Un acte de justice.
ni igikorwa cy'ubutabera.
Aujourd'hui, nous nous souvenons des martyrs de Gatumba.
uno munsi twibuka abiciwe abamartire ba Gatumba.
Nous nous souvenons aussi de toutes les autres victimes.
ariko kandi turibuka n'abandi bose bishwe.
J'ai vu dans la petite vidéo qu'on nous a montrée
nabonye muri video ntoya batweretse
que sur la liste des victimes,
ko muri liste y'abantu bishwe
on a repris plusieurs bembe.
hari ababembe basubi nabo barimo.
Ce sont les membres des communautés qui ne sont pas les Banyamulenge,
abo ni abantu nabo batari abanyamurenge
mais qui ont été endeuillés aussi.
nabo biciwe.
Notre mémoire
ukwibuka kwacu
ne cherche pas la vengeance ni la division.
ntabwo gushakisha kwihorera cyangwa amacakubiri.
Nous cherchons la vérité,
dushaka ukuri,
nous cherchons la justice,
dushaka ubutabera,
nous cherchons la réconciliation.
dushaka ukwiyunga.
Alors, frères et sœurs, je disais qu'il y a des moments
na bene data navuze ko hari ibihe
où la vie, où les paroles plutôt ne suffisent pas.
aho amagambo adakwiriye.
Il y a des douleurs
hariho imibabaro
que l'on ne peut pas expliquer,
udashobora gusobanura,
des séparations que l'on n'arrive pas à accepter,
gutandukana tudakunda kwemera,
et des larmes
ndetse n'amarira
que personne ne peut arrêter.
umuntu adashobora guhagarika.
C'est précisément dans des moments comme ça
ni mu bihe nk'ibyo ngibyo
que le texte de la Bible que j'ai donné, Jean chapitre 11, le verset 35,
wa murongo wa Bibiliya navuze wa Yohana 11 murongo wa 35
nous révèle quelque chose de profondément réconfortant.
bitugaragariza ikintu kitugomba kudutera intege.
Jésus pleura.
Yesu ararira.
La première chose que je voudrais qu'on retienne,
ikintu cya mbere nifuza ko tugumana,
c'est que Jésus comprend notre douleur.
nuko Yesu yumva umubabaro wacu.
Même si les hommes ne comprennent pas,
naho abantu udashobora kuwumva,
Jésus lui comprend.
Yesu arabyumva.
Lorsque Jésus arrive à Béthanie,
Yesu ashitse i Betaniya,
Lazare est déjà mort.
Lazaro yaramaze gupfa.
Marthe et Marie sont dans la douleur.
Marita na Mariya bari mu gahinda.
Et toute leur famille est plongée dans le deuil.
Bose umuryango wabo wose wari mu gahinda kenshi.
Jésus aurait pu leur dire
Yesu yashobora kubabwira
immédiatement,
muri uwo mwanya kiyagera,
ne pleurez plus,
akababwira ati ntimurire
car je vais ressusciter Lazare.
kuko ndahita muzura.
Mais il ne commence pas par le miracle.
Ariko ntabwo yahise atangirira gukora igitanga.
Même s'il sait que Lazare va ressusciter,
naho yarazi yuko Lazaro agiye azazuka cyangwa
ce qui me touche moi,
ngewe ikinkoraho cyane,
c'est qu'il commence par partager la douleur.
yatangiye gufatikanya nabo mu gahinda.
Il pleure aussi.
nawe ararira.
C'est pour ça que nous sommes tous ici,
Niyo mpamvu turi hano
pour pleurer.
kugira ngo twese turire.
Tous les peuples du monde
ubwoko bwose ku isi
devraient se joindre à nous pour pleurer.
bagagombye kwifatanya natwe kugira ngo turirire hamwe.
Jésus voit les larmes de Marie,
Yesu abona amarira ya Mariya,
entend les lamentations de ceux qui l'entourent,
yumva kwitotomba kw'abantu bari ku ruhande rw'iwe,
il pleure lui aussi.
nawe ararira.
Cela signifie que lorsque nous pleurons,
Ni ukuvuga ngo mu gihe natwe turi kurira,
Jésus n'est pas indifférent à nos larmes.
Yesu ntabwo yirengagiza
Il
Mariya.
ne nous regarde pas de loin,
Ntabwo aturebera kure
comme un spectateur invisible, insensible.
nk'umuntu uturebera gusa umuspectateur.
Il s'approche de celui qui souffre.
Ni ukuvuga ngo yegera abababara.
Frères et sœurs,
Bene data,
nos larmes ne sont pas un signe de manque de foi.
amarira yacu cyangwa amasozi yacu ntabwo ari ikimenyetso cyo kubura kwizera.
Marthe et Marie,
Mariya na Marita
pourtant, avaient la foi.
bari bafite kwizera.
Elles disent toutes les deux à Jésus,
Bombi babiri
Seigneur, si tu étais ici,
baravuga bati, mwami iyo uza kuba uri hano,
mon frère ne serait pas mort.
uyu muvandimwe wacu Lazaro ntiyari kuba yapfuye.
Je voudrais dire
Ndashaka kuvuga
à mes frères et sœurs,
bene data bavandimwe,
cette question peut être dans la tête de chacun.
hari abantu iki kibazo gishobora kuba kiri mu mitwe.
Si Dieu, vraiment, si Jésus était là,
Niyo Yesu aza kuba ari hari kumwe natwe,
nos frères et sœurs ici ne seraient pas morts.
bene wacu bashiki bacu n'abana bacu ntiba barapfuye.
Non, Jésus n'a pas dit, Jésus n'a pas
Yesu
dit,
ntiyavuze
si vous croyez en Jésus,
nimba mwizera muri Kristo
vous n'allez pas pleurer.
ko mutazigera murira.
Non, vous pouvez croire en Jésus
Yego mushobora kwizera muri Yesu
et pleurer.
ariko mukarira.
C'est pour ça que la Bible dit,
Cyo gituma Bibiliya ivuga
Dieu est plus proche de ceux qui ont le cœur brisé.
Yesu yegereye cyane abafite imitima ibabaye cyangwa ijanjaguritse.
Si votre cœur est brisé,
Nimba imitima yanyu ijanjaguritse,
je voudrais vous donner une parole d'espérance.
shaka kubaha ubutumwa bwo
Dieu est proche de vous.
Imana iri hafi yanyu.
Non, je ne sais pas si vous comprenez ça.
Sinzi ko iyo mubyumva.
Si votre cœur est brisé,
Nimba imitima yanyu imenetse,
c'est que Dieu est près de vous.
Yesu Imana iri hafi yanyu.
Si les Banyamulenge ont un cœur brisé,
Nimba abanyamurenge bafite imitima imenetse
ils
cyangwa
devaient être fiers
bakagombye kwirata
que Dieu
ko Imana
est près d'eux.
iri hafi yabo.
Lorsque Jésus pleure,
Yesu ararira
mais il n'abandonne pas.
ariko ntiyigeze abareka cyangwa ngo
Jésus pleure, il n'abandonne pas.
Yesu ararira ariko ntabwo akureka.
C'est le point le plus important dans ce message de Jean.
Nicyo kintu cyangombwa muri ubu butumwa bwa Yohana.
Il dit que pleurer
Aravuga ngo kurira
n'est pas la fin de l'histoire.
ntabwo ariyo herezo ry'amateka.
Je voudrais que les Banyamulenge comprennent
Ndashaka kumva ko bene data b'abanyamurenge
que
babyumva.
pleurer
Kurira
n'est pas la fin de l'histoire.
ntabwo ariyo herezo ry'amateka.
Ce n'est pas la fin de l'histoire.
Ntabwo ariyo herezo.
Lorsque Jésus-Christ pleure,
Mu gihe Yesu yarize
dans Jean chapitre 11, le verset 35,
muri Yohana 11:35,
quelques versets plus loin,
andi mavesi cyangwa indi mirongo ikurikira,
il dit Lazare sort.
aravuga ngo Lazaro va mumva sohoka.
Et celui qui était mort est sorti du tombeau.
Wari wapfuye ava mumva.
Voilà notre espérance.
Iki nicyo ko kwizera kwacu.
Jésus peut pleurer avec nous aujourd'hui,
Ibyingiro byacu nuko Yesu ashobora kurira natwe no munsi,
tout en préparant un miracle de demain.
ariko ategura n'igitangaza cy'ejo.
Je ne sais pas s'il y a quelqu'un qui note ça.
Sinzi ko hari umuntu uri kubyumva.
Jésus peut pleurer avec nous aujourd'hui,
Yesu ashobora kurira natwe uno munsi,
tout en préparant un miracle de demain.
ariko ari gutegura igitangaza cyacu ejo.
Jésus est présent dans les lieux de nos larmes.
Yesu ari kumwe natwe mu bihe cyangwa aho turi kurira mu masozi.
Frères et sœurs,
Bene data,
je suis venu témoigner ici aujourd'hui
naje guhamya uno munsi
parce que j'ai vu beaucoup de choses cruelles.
nabonye ibintu bibi cyane.
Il y a des moments
hari ibihe
dans la vie d'un homme
mu buzima bw'umwana w'umuntu
que On vit des choses qu'on ne peut pas s'expliquer.
ubona ibintu udashobora nawe ubwawe kwisobanurira.
Mon témoignage,
ubuhamya bwanjye,
permettez-moi
ubunyemerere,
qu'il ne commence pas à Gatumba.
ntabwo itangirira muri Gatumba.
Non.
Ntabwo itangirira mu Gatumba. Ntabwo ubuhamya butangirira muri.
Je ne veux pas commencer mon témoignage par Gatumba.
Ntabwo nshaka gutangira ubuhamya bwanjye na Gatumba.
Permettez-moi de revenir
munyemerere nsubira inyuma
sur un autre drame
ku kindi kintu cyabaye undi bwicanyi bwawe
qui a profondément marqué ma vie
bwakoze ku buzima bwanjye
et qui demeure insuffisamment connu.
kandi busa nkaho butazwi neza.
Le 26 août 1998, la République démocratique du Congo était dans une période de guerre qui allait profondément bouleverser son histoire. La ville de Kalemi, la cité de Viura, la ville de Bukavu, la ville d'Uvira furent les théâtres d'événements tragiques qui allaient laisser une blessure profonde dans la mémoire oui, de nombreuses familles. Des Banyavyura, des Banyamulenge et d'autres Congolais d'origine Tutsi furent arrêtés dans un climat de suspicion et de violence. Pour ceux de Viura et de Kalemi, ils furent conduits à la prison de Kalemi. Avant d'y être extraits, au motif de leur transfert à Lubumbashi, où ils n'iront pas. Plusieurs d'entre eux furent exécutés sommairement. Leurs corps furent dissimulés dans une fosse commune située non loin du camp marais de Kalemi, vers l'aéroport. Mesdames et messieurs, moi, Paul Moussafiri, je suis allé rechercher ces gens-là. J'ai fait 33 jours en train de les chercher, circulant un peu partout. J'ai rencontré des témoins. J'ai recueilli des confidences. J'ai suivi des pistes parfois contradictoires. Mais j'avais toujours la même conviction. Les familles avaient le droit de connaître la vérité. Elles avaient le droit de savoir où reposaient les morts. Ils avaient le droit de leur offrir une dernière demeure. Dans de telles circonstances, rechercher une fosse commune n'est pas seulement une démarche matérielle. C'est une mission. C'est accompagner les familles dans leur douleur. C'est redonner une identité à ce que la mort a voulu réduire au silence. C'est proclamer que même après la mort, la dignité humaine reste inviolable. kuhaba.
Alors, au terme de ces investigations,
Ngiye gusoza iyo perereza nari ndimo,
j'ai finalement retrouvé la fosse commune.
naje kubona icyo cyobo.
Comment?
Gute?
Grâce à quelques indications
bivuye mu bintu b'ikimenyetso bike nari mfite,
que j'ai obtenues au petit marché à côté du pont Lukuga de Kalemi.
ibimenyetso nakuye hafi y'isoko ritoya rya Lukuga muri Kalemi.
En interrogeant les marchands,
Ndi kubaza abantu baho ngaho bacuruzi bo kuri iryo soko,
ils m'ont dit
barambwira ngo
le camion qui a amené ces gens-là
amakamyo yazanaga bariya abantu
s'est arrêté ici.
yahagazaga hano.
Ils ont acheté des sacs
Bafata amasake, mifuka,
de raffia, ils ont acheté.
bafata imifuka barazigura.
Comme magistrat du parc de carrière,
Kuko jyewe nari umucamanza wabigize umwuga,
je me suis dit, s'ils ont acheté des sacs,
nimba baraguze imifuka,
c'est que les gens qu'ils ont amenés ne sont pas allés à Lubumbashi.
pardon,
C'est que les gens qu'ils ont amenés ne sont pas partis à Lubumbashi.
ni ukuvuga ngo ba bantu bazanye ntabwo babatwaye Lubumbashi.
Les sacs là devaient leur servir de cacher le corps.
Ni ukuvuga ngo ya mifuko yabafashe kugira ngo bahishe ya mibiri.
J'ai donc su qu'à partir de là,
Nambise menya yuko aho ngaho,
les hommes sont morts entre là et l'aéroport.
menya yuko abantu bapfiriye hafi hagati y'aho ngaho na aeroport.
Et c'est là que je devais retrouver leur corps.
na aho ngaho hagati y'aho ngaho nagomba gushaka imibiri yabo.
J'ai commencé à chercher.
Nkomeza gushakisha.
J'ai cherché pendant 33 jours, comme je vous ai dit.
Nkuko nababwiye nakoze iminsi 33.
J'ai finalement retrouvé
Naje kuzibona.
la fosse commune.
Naje kubona uwo mwobo, cyo cyobo.
Lorsque j'ai commencé l'exhumation des cadavres,
Mu gihe natangiye kuhamba no gukuramo iyo mibiri,
frères et sœurs,
bene data,
c'est inimaginable.
ni ibintu udashobora gutekereza.
Prendre des personnes,
Ufata abantu
les jeter dans ces conditions-là,
ukabata muri ubwo buryo,
c'est inimaginable.
ni ibintu udashobora gutekereza.
C'est donc à ce moment rencontrer quelque chose qui est de plus douloureux dans ma carrière.
Nibwo nahuye n'ikintu kibabaje cyane mu buzima bwanjye, mu mateka yanjye.
C'est regarder en face les conséquences de la haine.
Nukureba ingaruka z'urwango, ukabireba imbere yawe.
Inutile de rappeler
Ntabwo ngomba kubibutsa
que plusieurs banyavyuga étaient également attaqués avec moi
ko benshi mu banyabyura batewe hamwe nanjye
à Kalemi,
muri Kalemi,
où ils étaient réfugiés dans une école.
nanjye nari nahungiye mu ishuri,
Nous étions là-bas
twese twari aho ngaho.
et la marine a commencé à bombarder l'école.
Abasirikare batangira kubombarda cyangwa gutera ibisasu.
L'objectif c'est de tuer tout le monde.
Intego yabo yari ukugira ngo abantu bose bapfe.
Frère, j'ai procédé à l'exhumation des cadavres.
Narahamburuye iyo mibiri,
Acheter des cercueils
ndongera kandi ngura amasanduku yo kubahambamo,
et mettre les corps dans des bateaux
nshira kandi iyo mibiri nyishira mu bwato,
qui les ont amenés à Uvira,
tuyizana i Buvira,
où ces corps ont été ensevelis.
niho iyo mibiri rero yahambiwe.
J'étais avec un jeune frère,
Nari kumwe n'umuvandimwe
Mathias Timira, je crois qu'il peut être ici.
witwa Maître Mathias Ntimira, sinzi ko ari hano.
Nous étions en train de faire ce travail. On a exhumé 78 corps.
Twahamburuye imibiri 78.
Il y avait parmi ces gens-là des militaires,
Muri abo bantu harimo abasirikare,
46.
harimo 46,
Il y avait 32 civils
harimo abasivile 32
qui étaient envoyés par nous, disons, rapatriés vers Uvira,
nabo basubije i Buvira
afin d'y recevoir une sépulture digne.
kugira ngo dushobore kubahamba mu cyubahiro.
Ce transfert vers Uvira kubakura rero aho ngaho tubatwara ibuvira
avait pour moi une grande signification.
byari bifite isobanuro ikomeye kuri njyewe.
Il permettait aux familles
byahesheje uburenganzira ku miryango
et à la communauté de se recueillir.
ndetse na communauté ku buryo bugari kugira ngo bashobore.
Car l'une des plus grandes souffrances des familles de disparus
kuko kimwe mu bintu bibabaza cyane ku bantu bapfushije
est de ne pas savoir où pleurer.
nukumenya aho nukutamenya aho uririra.
Une tombe n'efface pas la douleur.
ntabwo imva ikuraho umubabaro,
Mais une tombe permet au moins au cœur humain de trouver un lieu où déposer son chagrin.
ariko bihesha umuntu wabuze uwo kugira ngo ashobore kumenya aho asuka agahinda kiyo cyangwa umubabaro wiwe.
Après Kalemi, frères et sœurs,
nyuma ya Kalemi,
l'histoire allait malheureusement nous conduire quelques années plus tard vers un autre lieu de souffrance.
amateka adusubiza kandi adutwara ahandi hantu h'akababaro ho kubabarira.
Un lieu qui allait devenir l'un des symboles les plus tragiques
aho hantu habaye symbole cyangwa ikimenyetso cy'imateka mabi cyane.
c'est Gatumba.
Gatumba.
Nous y sommes allés.
twari twagiye.
Nous sommes partis à Gatumba
twagiye Gatumba
avant que les gens soient tués.
mbere y'uko abantu bapfa.
Frères,
bene data,
sœurs,
bavandimwe bashiki,
pour aller à Gatumba,
kugira ngo tugere Gatumba,
parce que tous les gens qui avaient fui
kuko abantu bose bari barahunze,
la ville d'Uvira,
abahunze Buvira,
la ville de Bukavu,
abahunze Bukavu,
Kalemi,
abahunze Kalemi,
Vyura,
abahunze Byura,
ils se sont éparpillés à travers les pays des Grands Lacs.
bari barashwiragiye mu bihugu bitandukanye bya.
Certains ont fui, ceux de Bukavu ont fui à Changugu,
abi Bukavu bahungiye Cyangugu,
ceux de Vyura
abi Byura
se sont alliés avec ceux d'Uvira
baje bifatanya n'abi Buvira
pour fuir au Burundi.
bahungira i Burundi.
Nous avons quitté Kinshasa
tuva i Kinshasa
pour aller faire un plaidoyer, obtenir que les réfugiés rentrent au Congo.
tujya gusaba kugira ngo impunzi zemererwe dusubire muri Congo.
Nous étions avec un frère que vous connaissez, Azarias Ruberwa.
twari kumwe n'umuvandimwe mwese muzi, Azarias Ruberwa.
Cet homme
uwo mugabo
fait beaucoup de choses que beaucoup de gens ne connaissent pas.
akora ibintu byinshi abantu benshi batazi.
J'ai vu cet homme-là
nabonye uyu mugabo
se battre
arwana,
seul contre tous
arwana wenyine ahangana n'abantu bose
dans un gouvernement
muri guverinoma
pour obtenir
kugira ngo
que les souffrances de Banyamulenge soient reconnues
kugira ngo agahinda cyangwa ibibazo by'abanyamurenge byemerwa
par l'État congolais.
na leta y'abakongomani.
Cet homme a la capacité de convaincre.
uyu mugabo afite imbaraga zo kwegeranya.
Nous sommes partis parce qu'il a obtenu que nous envoie à mission.
kuko yari yemerewe yuko dutwara muri mission.
Nous sommes partis avec lui.
turajyana muri mission.
D'abord, on a commencé par voir le président rwandais
turabanza tujya guca tubona président w'u Rwanda
négocier que les réfugiés qui sont à Changugu rentrent à Bukavu.
kugira ngo tumusabe tunegoshe ko impunzi ziri cyangwa.
Nous avons vu le président burundais
turagenda tubona président w'u Burundi
pour obtenir que les réfugiés qui sont au Burundi rentrent au Congo.
kugira ngo impunzi ziri mu Burundi nazo zisubira muri Congo.
Au Burundi particulièrement,
mu Burundi aho ngaho
nous avons même institué un comité pour les retours.
twanashoboye gushyiraho amakomite ashinzwe gutahisha abantu.
Comme par hasard,
sinzi ukuntu byagenze ku
le
mpanuka.
comité était dirigé par un certain Moussafiri.
komite yari iyobowe n'umugabo witwa Musafiri.
Ce n'est pas moi,
ntabwo ari njyewe,
c'est Moussafiri que certains connaissent ici.
n'uwundi Musafiri abandi benshi bazi hano.
Nous avons été là, nous avons fait des réunions,
dukora amanama,
nous avons prié. Nous avons prié
turanasenga,
avec les Banyamulenge qui étaient là,
turasenga n'abanyamurenge bari aho,
les hommes,
abagabo,
les femmes,
abagore
les enfants.
n'abana.
Nous avons prié
twese turasenga
nous avons délivré un message de solidarité.
ndetse dutanga ubutumwa bwo kufatikanya nabo.
Nous avons vu
twarabonye
la souffrance.
tubona umubabaro barimo.
Nous avons vu
twabonye
le courage.
twabonye imbaraga bari bafite.
Nous sommes repartis à Bukavu.
dusubira i Bukavu.
Nous pensions avoir accompli une visite de solidarité.
twari twibajije ko twakoze urugendo rwo kwifatikanya n'abavandimwe.
Nous ignorions
ntitwari tuzi
que quelques heures plus tard,
ko nyuma y'amasaha make
ces mêmes personnes
abo bantu
que nous venions de saluer
twari tuvuye kuramutsa
allaient être confrontés
bagomba guhura
à l'une des nuits les plus terribles de leur existence.
nijoro rikomeye ribi cyane bw'ubuzima bwabo.
Nous sommes rentrés,
dusubirayo.
mon frère. Il y a des moments dans la vie d'un homme où le temps semble s'arrêter.
hariho ibihe mu buzima bw'umuntu aho igihe isaha isa nkaho ihagaze.
Des moments où quelques paroles entendues au téléphone suffisent
igihe amagambo yo ku telefone wumva ku telefone akwiriye yonyine
à bouleverser une existence entière.
kugira ngo ashobore guhindura ubuzima bw'umuntu.
La nuit qui suivit notre retour à Bukavu
ijoro ryakurikiye dusubira i Bukavu
reste gravé dans ma mémoire.
yagumye mu mutima wanjye.
Quelques heures seulement après notre départ de Gatumba,
amasaha make tuvuye Gatumba,
un téléphone, un coup de téléphone
baraduhamagaye,
nous a appelés.
baraduhamagara
Au bout de fil,
ku murongo.
ce n'était pas une simple information.
ntabwo ari amakuru asanzwe gusa.
Ce n'était pas un récit ordinaire.
ntabwo bari kubatubwira ibintu bisanzwe.
C'était des cris.
byari umuborogo.
Des cris de tristesse.
umuborogo w'agahinda.
Des cris de personnes qui étaient en train de vivre l'inimaginable.
umuborogo w'abantu bari ko baca mu bintu bitagira izina.
Des voix qui demandaient secours.
abantu bari ko baratakamba basaba ubufasha.
Des voix qui appartenaient à des hommes,
amajwi y'abagabo,
des femmes
y'abagore
et des enfants
ndetse n'abana
que nous avions rencontrés quelques heures auparavant.
twari tumaze guhura nabo mu masaha ashize.
Ils nous appelaient pendant que leur camp était attaqué.
bari kuduhamagara mu gihe ikambi yabo yatewe.
Ils nous appelaient pendant que la peur envahissait les familles.
baduhamagaraga mu gihe ubwoba bwari ko buzura.
Ils nous appelaient pendant que la mort
baduhamagaraga
frappait parmi eux.
igihe urupfu rwabegereje.
Je me souviens encore de cette douleur immense.
nibuka umubabaro.
Cette sensation d'impuissance.
uko kumva udafite ubushobozi bwo kutagira ubushobozi.
Devant une tragédie.
imbere y'icyago nk'icyo.
Nous étions anéantis.
twacitse intege.
Frères, nous étions membres du gouvernement.
bene data twari abantu bari muri gouvernement.
Incapables de protéger notre propre population.
tudashobora no kukingira abantu bacu.
Les mots
amagambo
devenaient insuffisants.
ntabwo yarakwiriye.
Les prières semblaient être la seule réponse possible
gusenga nicyo cyari gisubizo cyonyine
face à une souffrance qui dépassait l'entendement humain.
imbere y'uwo mubabaro urengeye gutahura k'umuntu.
C'est dans la nuit du 13 au 14 août
ni mu ijoro ya 13 uja mu 14 mu kwezi k'umunani
que ce camp de Gatumba a été attaqué
iyo nkambi ya Gatumba yatewe
et que 166 réfugiés Banyamulenge furent tués.
impunzi 166 z'abanyamulenge ziri.
La majorité des victimes étaient des civils.
benshi muri bo barabasivile.
Des personnes qui avaient déjà connu l'épreuve de la guerre.
barabasivile kandi bose bari baraciye barababonye
Qui avaient cherché refuge dans l'espoir d'être protégés.
bari bagiye guhunga bafite icyizere cy'uko bashobora gukingirwa.
Et n'ont pas eu la protection nécessaire.
ariko ntibigeze bakingirwa ntabyo baronse.
Les gens sont morts.
abantu barapfa.
On en a entendu, je ne vais pas y revenir.
twabyumvise.
Frères et sœurs, nous sommes rentrés le lendemain à Gatumba.
bene data twasubiyeyo umunsi ukurikira mu Gatumba.
Nous ne sommes pas partis comme la veille.
ntabwo twasubiyeyo nkuko twari tuvuyeyo.
La veille, nous étions venus rencontrer des réfugiés.
Ubwo tuherukayo twari tuvuyeyo kujya kureba impunzi.
Nous étions venus écouter leurs souffrances.
Twari tugiye kubumva twumva akababaro kabo.
Nous étions venus partager leur espérance.
Twari tuje kugira ngo dusangire ibyiringiro.
Mais le lendemain,
ariko uwo munsi ukurikira dusubiyeyo,
nous revenions dans un lieu totalement transformé par la tragédie.
twagarutse ahantu twari tuvuye hahinduwe n'ibyo byago byari byahakubise.
Nous étions face à une réalité que l'esprit humain peine encore à accepter.
Tugaruka na amarangamutima umwana w'umuntu adashobora gutaha.
Nous étions revenus pour enterrer
twari twagarutse kugira ngo duhambe
nos frères et sœurs.
abo bavandimwe.
Les visages que nous avions vus quelques heures auparavant n'étaient plus là.
Amasura twari tumaze kubona amasaha mbere ntiyaragihari.
Les voix que nous avions entendues s'étaient tues.
Amajwi twari twumvise yari yacecetse.
Les abris avaient été détruits.
Amahema yabo cyangwa bari batuye hari hasenyutse.
Mon frère, ma sœur,
Mwene data mushiki wanjye,
c'est difficile de parler.
biragoye kuvuga.
C'est vraiment difficile.
Biragoye.
Mais Jésus
Ariko
pleure avec nous. Jésus pleure avec nous.
Yesu arirana natwe.
Je voudrais simplement, avant de terminer,
Mbere yuko turangiza,
mesdames et messieurs,
bene data,
vous dire que la mémoire que nous faisons ici,
ku kwibuka turi gukora hano,
comme quelqu'un l'a dit avant moi,
nkuko ababivuze mbere babivuze,
appelle une responsabilité,
biduhamagarira mu nshingano,
un devoir de conscience.
Nshingano zo ku la conscience.
Lorsqu'on a vécu de tels événements,
Mu gihe tubaye mu bintu nk'ibi,
les commémorations ne peuvent jamais être de simples cérémonies.
kwibuka ntabwo biba gusa amaseremoni asanzwe.
Elles deviennent un engagement.
Bigomba kuba engagement cyangwa
Envers ceux qui ne peuvent plus parler.
kuri bariya batagishoboye kuvuga.
Elles deviennent une responsabilité
Ibihinduka inshingano
envers les générations futures.
kuri ku rungano ruzaza.
Aujourd'hui
Uno munsi
est un temps pour nous souvenir,
ni umwanya wo kwibuka,
un temps pour honorer nos disparus.
ni umwanya wo guhasha icyubahiro abapfuye bose. Ariko
C'est aussi un temps
n'ikindi gihe nacyo
pour travailler à un avenir différent.
kugira ngo dukorere ejo hazaza heza.
C'est ici
N'ahangaha
que je salue le courage
aho nshaka gushimira cyangwa
de plusieurs de nos frères
gushimira bene data benshi, bavandimwe benshi
qui ont décidé de se battre
bahisemo kurwana
pour avoir un avenir différent.
kwirwanaho kugira ngo ejo bazagire
Les hommes comme le docteur Freddy Kaniki,
abagabo nka Dr Freddy Kanyiki
qui a tout laissé ici,
basize byose hano
est rentré au Congo.
basubira muri Congo.
Des hommes comme ça doivent être respectés.
Abantu nk'aba bagomba kubahwa.
Des gens comme Maître Moïse Nyarugabo qui se bat là-bas contre tous.
Abagabo nka Maître Moïse Nyarugabo,
malgré l'adversité, il se bat toujours.
Naho aca mu bibazo byinshi, abamurwanya benshi akakomeza kwirwana.
Des personnes comme Sematama,
abantu nka Sematama,
ce sont des personnes
n'abantu
qui doivent être respectées.
bagomba kubahwa.
Ces personnes doivent être rejointes
Abo bantu rero bagomba
par les autres qui le peuvent.
gushigiki.
Ces personnes doivent être rejointes
Abo bantu bagomba gusangwa
par les autres qui le peuvent.
n'abandi bose babishoboye.
La grandeur morale d'une société
Imbaraga z'umutima za communauté cyangwa société
se mesure à sa capacité de reconnaître la souffrance de tous.
ni biva mu mbaraga zabo zo gushobora kumenya umubabaro wabo bose.
Alors, frère, l'histoire récente de l'Est de la République démocratique du Congo
Amateka ya vuba y'igihugu cyacu cya Repubulika Démocratique ya Congo
nous enseigne une vérité douloureuse.
butwigisha ukuri kubabaje.
Aucune communauté ne peut construire durablement son avenir dans la peur.
Nta communauté nimwe yakomeza kubaho mu bwoba cyangwa kubaga amateka yayo mu bwoba.
L'exclusion ou la méfiance des autres.
Gucinyizwa cyangwa kuvangurwa
Les communautés de l'Est sont condamnées à vivre ensemble. Elles doivent donc apprendre à vivre ensemble dans la dignité, la justice et la confiance. La construction de la paix exige le courage. Elle exige de reconnaître les souffrances de toutes les communautés. De combattre les discours de haine. De rejeter les représailles collectives. De rejeter les représailles collectives. Et de promouvoir une justice capable de lutter contre l'impunité. Elle exige également un dialogue sincère entre les communautés. Où chacun puisse raconter ses blessures sans nier celles de l'autre. Il est parfois demandé aux victimes d'oublier rapidement. Mais on ne construit pas la paix sur l'amnésie. On ne construit pas la réconciliation sur les silences imposés aux victimes. On ne construit pas l'unité sur la négation des souffrances. Une paix véritable repose sur 3 fondements. La vérité, la justice, la réconciliation. Il y a plusieurs leçons à tirer des événements que nous avons connus. Moi j'ai retrouvé plusieurs, mais pour des raisons de temps, laissez-moi citer simplement 4 leçons. Première leçon, l'indifférence devant la première victime. L'indifférence devant la première victime prépare la victime suivante. Deuxième leçon, la vie humaine doit être placée au-dessus de l'identité. Troisième leçon, l'impunité est une invitation à la répétition. Et la 4e leçon, c'est celle avec laquelle j'ai commencé. Elle est spirituelle. Jésus pleure avec ceux qui pleurent. Jésus comprend notre douleur. Nos larmes ne sont pas un signe de manque de foi. Jésus pleure mais il n'abandonne pas. Jésus est présent dans les lieux de nos larmes. Voici la conclusion de mon intervention. Pour terminer, en commémorant les victimes de Gatumba, faisons donc le choix de transformer notre douleur en responsabilité et notre engagement et notre mémoire en engagement. Que leurs souvenirs nous rappellent kugira ngo kwibuka kwabo amateka yabo twibuka
que nous avons le devoir de bâtir un Congo
ko dufite inshingano zo kubaka Congo
où l'identité communautaire
aho amoko cyangwa identité z'amoko
n'est plus une condamnation.
bitakiri ikintu cyo kukondana bitari cyaha,
et où la diversité est une richesse,
ahubwo ko gutandukana kwacu ari ubwo butunzi,
et où chaque citoyen peut vivre
aho buri muturage wese ashobora kuba
sans craindre d'être persécuté à raison de son appartenance.
adatinya kwicwa cyangwa kugirirwa nabi kubera inkomoko yiwe.
Aujourd'hui,
uno munsi
rendons hommage aux victimes
reka twibuke abacu
en nous engageant à transmettre aux générations futures
kandi twiyemeje kubwira amageneration azakurikira
non pas la haine héritée des conflits,
atari urwango ruva mu mateka cyangwa mu bibazo byabaye mbere,
mais la culture du dialogue, de la tolérance, de la justice et de la paix.
ariko umuco wo kubabarirana ubworoherane no gushira hamwe n'amahoro.
N'oublions jamais les victimes.
Ntituzigera twibagira abacu.
Mesdames et messieurs,
bene data,
Jésus pleure avec nous.
Yesu arirana natwe.
Je vous remercie.
Murakoze. Thank you very much, Professor Pastor Paul Musafiri. Now we're going to go straight to Dr. Whitney Backos. Dr. Whitney Backos is going to talk about the lasting impact of trauma. Dr. Whitney Backos is a professor at Liberty University, and she's going to share with us her message, her remarks about lasting impacts of trauma. Thank you.
Murakoze cyane. I'm sorry it's so late, and I'm sorry that I can't speak to you in your language. I wish I could share this with you in your language, but thank you for taking time. I'm honored to be here. It's amazing to be around all of you and to hear your stories. And even though I can't understand every word that is being shared, I absolutely understand what's being said. What's being shared is important, and that's why I'm here. I'm proud to be here as a guest of my student, Jean Namagisha. She went with me to Rwanda last year, and I learned about GATUMBA. I've been traveling to Rwanda for many years now, and I've spent several hours trying to learn about the various people, the regions that make up East Central Africa and its countries. Something that you should know about me is that I love to learn, and I spend a lot of time doing that. It takes a lot of learning to earn a doctoral degree. Namagisha would tell you that too. In my trips to Rwanda, I've taken very seriously in terms of learning. I've consumed books and documentaries trying to learn about the experiences of people there who have survived genocide. But it's important for you to know that I never knew about the massacres that happened after genocide. I didn't know about GATUMBA. To give you some additional perspectives, I've had opportunities to travel from Kigali and going on safari in Akagera. I've ministered in places like Deriva, Bugesera. I've spent time in Nyaturama and Yamata, and I've traveled up along almost as far as the volcanoes in Kivu. I've spent hours and days reading books and resources. I've watched films and documentaries and interviews of survivors of genocide against Tutsis in the region there. I've sat in lectures where I have heard genocide survivors tell their stories. I've listened intently as people who I now call friends explain the losses they suffered. And even as they explained them, I knew there is no way I could even imagine what was being said. I felt that way again today. I hear your stories, and I don't pretend to understand what you have lived through. As my heart has grown for the people I've learned to love in all these years where I've traveled to Rwanda and studied in the area, my heart has drawn me more and more to learn about trauma, loss in the area, in the region. I've been lucky enough to now bring my husband, Scott, with me twice for the last 2 years. I've visited Rwanda. My son, Sebastian, who's 17, he's with me here today. He plans to take his first trip in 2027. Although we've not traveled to the beautiful region of the Congo, I've journeyed to Mzanzi on 2 different trips, and I've spent time in that beautiful, lush countryside there. And because I love to garden and grow my own plants and vegetables and fruits in my own yard, I've spent a lot of time talking to an agronomist there, a scientist who works with the land and who teaches people there how to use the land. I've learned more about how the growing seasons work and how the local farmers use the land and the plants to create perfect environments for their crops to grow. You don't just have one growing season like we do here in the Midwest, that beautiful area of the world. I'm just amazed by it. I've read and listened and studied for many hours trying to learn about the land there, about the people, the region, and I really did think that I knew a lot about the land and the way the farmers tend the soil and the crops that grow. I really also thought I knew a lot about the landscape of trauma and the history and the things that have bloomed as a result of that trauma, losses, things that are born from pain and thorns, and from those people who are also showing signs of future growth and resilience. But this March in 2026, as I said, on a journey back to Kigali and Mzanzi, I had the privilege of sitting alongside a survivor who had immigrated here as a refugee to the United States, a doctoral student at Liberty University, and someone who shared with me the story of Gatumba. I had the privilege of sitting alongside my student, Jean, and she graciously, but carefully, shared memories of what your people endured during the Gatumba genocide. I had not known this story, and if I don't know the story, I know that millions of other people don't know this story. I want you to know I'm learning more about trauma and suffering, survival and healing by meeting you and by learning more about your history and your study in studying your story. I'm grateful to Jean for working with me today. As we stand here today, she's working to translate this, and she already has actually translated this so that you can hear it in your own language. In the last year, in the years to come, she's helping me to understand more about your experience, and I wish I could offer you today doctoral level learning that she's doing on this important topic, but time will restrict me from doing that. But I want to honor you in your history. As I stand before you here today in remembrance of this orchestrated and horrifying act of violence against your family and friends, I want to acknowledge that your history, as well as your grief and survival, are important to our world today. But if the story is not shared, the world can't honor it. I suppose many are like me and don't know your story, but now that I know part of your story, I feel a strong sense of responsibility to honor it. I have 2 main things I want to tell you about today, and I will try to be brief with them. One of them is about the science of survival. I'm not going to go into a big lesson about the brain. I wish I could today. But I'm going to talk about the survival of the science of survival and the search for healing. And I'm thrilled that Jean, and my future colleague as a doctoral student and a future doctor, is here today, and she's somebody that you will continue to be able to talk with. I also want to acknowledge something important, and that's for 22 years, many in this room have fought tirelessly for justice, for legal recognition and for accountability, and that work is essential. It honors those who were lost, but as a traumatologist, I also know that external advocacy can sometimes consume all our energy, and it can leave no room for our own internal wounds to be able to heal. I don't want to take any energy away from that important pursuit. Instead, I want to invite you to consider if there's room for both the important pursuits of justice and healing at the same time. Pursuing justice honors the community, and it allows you to heal, and it honors you and your story. Every one of you in this room deserves to have both of those things. I want you to know that you do not have to sacrifice your own peace to keep the fight for justice alive. My first point is about the traumatized mind, this idea, the science behind trauma. And as a traumatologist, this is what I do. I study, I write, I teach about what happens to human beings when unimaginable things happen to them. At the core of loss, trauma is characterized by one overwhelming, almost universal experience by people when they live through something. It's a complete loss of control. Trauma strips away our agency as a person. It shatters our sense that the world is safe, that it's orderly, that it's predictable. When trauma happens, the brain tries desperately to do what it was designed to do. It tries to organize the memory to make life make sense, somehow make sense again. Pioneers in trauma recovery, people like Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, Francine Shapiro, these are researchers who've spent years and years studying and writing about these things. They've shown us that the mind and body naturally tries to process raw, terrifying events in a way that the brain can store them as history, as in the past. But the brain actually struggles to do that. I've heard stories today about how the brain is struggling to do that. The brain often remembers things in smells, in sounds, in feelings of terror, in addition to remembering the facts about the events that actually happened. I could tell you many stories that time would not permit me to do today, but science has shown us that many people have varying experiences with this. They'll often remember losses and trauma in their past and actually relive them in terrifying detail when they do. But remember what I said, the brain is in a quest for control. Because trauma feels at its core so out of control, our mind will often construct loops to try to regain control. We'll say to ourselves things like, maybe if I'd have done something a little differently, maybe the outcome could have changed. This often occurs with an image or a fantasy with, oh, what could I have done differently? Or we maybe re-examine every detail. Maybe it wasn't quite like I remember it. Our minds even will try to tell ourselves stories to try to ensure our loved ones, maybe they didn't suffer as badly as they did. Our minds will invent stories. Sometimes we could focus every ounce of our energy outward. If I could just catch the perpetrator, if we could just achieve total justice, then the trauma, what they did, won't have won. Of course, this is something that's important, and it's one that often resonates with survivors, and it should. But this is one of the most common directions that survivors will often target their energies. And I do want to say, those thoughts are all completely normal. In the aftermath of something horrible, these loops that a brain goes through are survival mechanisms. They're the things that our brains immediately respond with. And fighting for justice, as we said, is honorable. It's essential. It restores a piece of that agency that was stolen from you. But there is a trap that trauma can set for us. If we cannot eventually allow ourselves to feel the terrible pain of what we lost, we can stay trapped in mental loops, trying over and over again to regain control of a past that cannot be rewritten. We can stay focused on the fight outside because entering into the quiet room of our own broken heart inside can feel far too frightening. And when that happens, trauma stops being a past event. It becomes a present living cycle inside our body. And when we're unable to remember, we end up having to relive a memory every time we try to remember it. I want to tell you a quick personal story, and I'm going to tell you a very short version of the story, but it's a very important event that happened in my life. I'm telling you this because I want you to know that I understand some of this concept not only through textbooks and through learning, not only through expertise as a professor and a traumatologist and as a counselor, a therapist, but through my own life. None of you in this room know this about me, and not even Namagisha, the survivor I met in 2026 who invited me here today, knew this story until this morning. But in May of 2025, 10 months before I met Jean, my own world was shattered by a sudden devastating trauma. My son, who's with me here today, fell 10 meters, 30 feet from a tree. In an instant, his spinal cord was damaged and he became paralyzed. I got the call at the moment that I had just finished an interview where I was hired as a department chair at Liberty University, and I'm a subject matter there for traumatology courses. I had taken the hour off. I was actually at work at my clinical practice, and I'd taken the hour off to take that interview. At the same time, I was getting ready the very next hour to see a patient who had suffered her own unimaginable traumas. In other words, I'm a clinical specialist in the field, and I'm an academic expert in traumatology, but that doesn't keep us as people from having to face our own problems and face our own trauma history. As a mother, this is my youngest son I'm talking about. As a mother, the moment my daughter called and said that Sebastian had fallen from a tree, I experienced a loss of control that was absolute. I raced to my car from my office, I called 911, I drove the 8 miles home, and I took off my dress shoes and ran into the pond where he was laying there. He was suffering from shock from the overwhelming pain, and of course, he was paralyzed, so he couldn't move out of the water. There was nothing I could do to help him. I don't have that feeling very often. When we got to the hospital, the doctors looked at his x-rays and said that my athletic, perfectly healthy teenage boy would spend the rest of his life in a wheelchair. Those first few days and weeks, my brain did likely a very similar thing that yours did, that anyone's brain does when they suffer trauma, when they suffer something horrifying. I replayed every second. Why did this happen? Why did I have to go to work today? What could I have done to stop it? How can I fix this? How can I take back control? It's immediate what we do. I wanted to fight this new reality with every fiber of my being, and we did everything we could to try to do that. We spent weeks living in a hospital. I know many of you have done that, and I know that many of you had outcomes that were far worse. I want to pause for a moment and say that my son is experiencing a miracle. Through a miracle that God did when he fell, and through relentless work and extraordinary resilience that Sebastian has displayed, he's doing what the doctors said was impossible. He's walking. We are praising God for that outcome. And we know that that's a miracle. But that's not the point I want to make to you today. The point I'm trying to make to you is if I never opened my mouth, if I never told you that story, and I came here and talked to you about trauma and some ideas in a textbook, you might have thought that I just came here and wanted to talk to you about something important. We only know things when we're willing to share them with one another. And I know that stories can be difficult to share. I watched stories be difficult to share today, and they broke my heart. I asked Sebastian if I could tell this story today because these stories can be tough to retell, but they are important. If we don't tell them, they're as good as gone to the past. I don't want the story of Sebastian's healing to be lost, and I know you don't want the story of GATUMBA to be forgotten, and I don't either. I want my young son to be here because I don't want him to be my age before he finds out about this important story. I want him to know about this and take this with him. Telling our stories is a way to regain some control over what we've lost. The story that is held in silence or only told within a group is a story the world cannot learn from, and the world cannot honor or hold with you. My second point that I want to make today, after the science of trauma, is that the body is designed to heal. You know that about yourself, right? You know that your body is designed to heal. This truth brings me to the greatest truth that traumatology has taught us, and that is the message I want to leave on your hearts today. Your body is hardwired to heal. Just as my son's nerves and muscles possess this innate biological drive to rebuild and reconnect, your nervous system possesses an incredible capacity for recovery. Healing is not something you have to invent or figure out. Healing is actually written in your DNA, even if you haven't felt everything return back to normal. As an example, have you ever cut yourself with a knife while cooking or while gardening or doing something? I have. My hands have a lot of scars on them. I love to work with the earth and cook with what it produces, but it's left me with scars. But what it hasn't left me with is open wounds. I want to ask you, what does your skin do with a cut? We can look at our hands and our feet and other places on our bodies where we have been cut and see that indeed our bodies are designed to heal. In fact, it's almost as if the scars that healing leaves behind bears witness to what has happened. How many times have you said to someone, well, this one happened when I did this, or this one happened when this other thing happened? Of course, I'm going to testify that healing is not easy. Healing takes a lot of work, and it can even be painful. But it's important to note that when we approach healing in a trauma-informed way, we realize that we don't have to relive that cut, that injury, that nightmare, every time we visit the story or talk about it. Unprocessed trauma, though, can feel like a fire that's happening right now in the room. It can actually feel scary to talk about. On the contrary, when trauma begins to be integrated or organized in the brain, we can allow ourselves to process grief gently. We can process it in safe spaces, and the story has the opportunity to transform. Trauma can move out of a reactive, panicked alarm center of the brain, and it can actually begin to transform. It can move from where we felt the knife right in our skin when we talk about it, and it can settle peacefully into long-term memory. Importantly, that's a place where we can remember trauma. It becomes a long-term memory, as opposed to always having to relive it when we remember it. Said another way, it becomes a story we remember rather than a reality we have to relive. And that's my prayer for you, that you can remember. That you can remember together, that you can remember when you're on your own, but not always have to relive. Your stories are the bedrock of this memory, and whether you speak that story out loud to the world, you share it softly with a trusted loved one, or sit quietly discussing it with a professional counselor or pastor, letting that story settle safely into long-term memory is how we move from just surviving something to living. For those of you in this room who are headed in that direction, thank you for welcoming me, for keeping the memory alive, and for allowing your strength to teach the world. I want to acknowledge that there are others of you in this room that may be reluctant to tell your story. Perhaps you feel that keeping silent protects you from the pain. Perhaps you feel that if you stop focusing on the fight for justice, or you allow yourself to remember instead of reliving, you might be giving up. Maybe you feel like that would be like forgetting your loved one, someone you cared about. I want you to know that I respect that perspective, and I respect that story. For those of you who feel that this is your reality, I want you to know that your experience is just as important as those who are ready to discuss their entire experience. I also want to invite you to consider whether telling your story is giving up a fight or taking back your agency and allowing others to learn your story. I'm so grateful to be with you here, and it's important for me to leave you with a message. Your future is not just a continuation of your past. Gatumba genocide is a tragic chapter in your history, and we must all commit to one another to remember this. But it's not where your story began, and it is not where it ends. I want to work with you to ensure that this story is not forgotten or buried in a history lesson somewhere. I also want to acknowledge that the acts of genocide against your people are not the sum total of who you are, nor is it the boundary of who you were allowed to become. You deserve external justice, yes, but more than that, you deserve internal peace. You deserve a nervous system that knows danger has passed, a brain and body that is healed and remembers, but no longer has to relive what it remembers. I want to tell you one final thing. I think the world needs your story. I needed your story in March of 2026 to open my own eyes. Others need it today to ensure that never again is not just a slogan, but it's a reality. I'm serving on the dissertation committee of my future colleague, Jean Namagisha, and I want to be able to help continue to honor her and your story, ensuring that the world knows what happened at Gatumba, ensuring that your loved ones are remembered, not just for how they died, but how they lived, who they were, and how fiercely you have loved and survived since then. That's the next chapter. And it's up to you and those you choose to share your story with. Thank you for inviting me here today, but more importantly, thank you for considering how to help more of us learn about your history as well as your future. We as traumatologists, and also the field of counseling and psychology, future leaders in international law and justice, we can all learn from your perspective. Thank you for sharing it. I pray the miracle of healing and peace be with all of you.
Thank you. Nk'uko mwabyumvise yitwa Dr. Bako Whitney, akaba ari profeseri mu kigo cya University cya Liberty. Yatangiye abashimira kuko uyu munsi mwamuteye ishema n'iteka ryo kuba muri kunamira abanyagatumba. Yavuze ati umwe muri mwebwe namumenyesheje ibya jenoside y'abanyagatumba, abanyamurenge baguye mu Gatumba. Yaramaze iminsi yiga hejuru y'uturere twa Afurika y'Iburasirazuba, ihungabana riterwa na jenoside ndetse n'ibindi bijanye n'ibihugu byo muri Afurika y'Iburasirazuba. Ariko uyu mwaka 2026 nibwo yumvise amakuru y'abanyamurenge baguye mu Gatumba bazize ko basaga. Yibaza ikibazo tese niba aribwo nk'icyumva hejuru abanyamurenge na jenoside yabakorewe ni ukuvuga ko hari abantu barenga miliyoni bandi bameze nkanje. Rero arashaka kubabwira ko mu myaka 20 ishize mwaharaniye ubutabera no kugira ngo ibyababayeho byemerwe n'ababikoze. Ariko kandi nanone nk'impuguke mwihungabana arashaka kubatumira ko muri uru rugendo rwo gukira no gushaka ubutabera, guharanira ubutabera, arabatumira ngo mwite no gukira kw'imitima yanyu. Ihungabana rishobora gutuma mukomeza kubaho nk'aho ibyababayeho n'uyu munsi bikiriko bibabaho, cyangwa se muri rya joro. Yatanze urugero ku nawe ko yigeze kugira ihungabana ubwo umwana we yagwaga hasi witwa Sebastian. Nubwo yari afite ubwo bumenyi hejuru ihungabana, ariko nawe ntibyamurobanuye ngo bivuge ngo ntahungabana. Yavuze ko buri muntu wese akira ku rugero rwe cyangwa se ku muvuduko utandukanye, ntabwo mwese muzakira kimwe. Uko ibisebe ku mubiri bikira, bigenda bikira gahoro gahoro, ni nako n'ibikomere byo mu mutima bigenda bikira. Ego ntabwo inkovu zizarangira, ariko ntimukemerere kuko ibisebe bihora birangaye. Gukira ntabwo bivuga ko muzibagirwa, muzagenda gahoro gahoro kugeza ubwo muzavuga ngo ndabyibuka ibyambayeho, ariko ntabwo niyumva kuko nk'ibiri muri rya joro. Iryo ni isengesho rye abafitiye muri kuri uyu mugoroba, ko muzageraho muvuga ngo ndibuka, ndaharanira ubutabera, ariko ntabwo nkiri wa wundi. Jenoside ya Gatumba ni igice cyabanjirije amateka yanyu, ariko siyo nkuru ibagize, siyo nkuru ibaranga. Mukwiriye ubutabera yego, kandi mukwiriye amahoro yo mutima. Isi igomba kumenya ibyababayeho mu Gatumba, kwibuka abo mwabuze mubahesha agaciro, no kumenya imbaraga zanyu zibarimo zibabitsemo. Inkuru yanyu ntikarangirire mu Gatumba, izakomeze uko mugenda mukira umunsi ku wundi, ukubaho muharanira ejo hanyu hazoza. Murakoze.
Thank you, Jean. Again, mwakoze kwihangana, amasaha yacu yatugiye, tubasabye imbabazi, ariko turagerageza mu minota isigaye tuyikoreshe neza, kandi kubera ikibazo cy'umwanya ntabwo twongera gusobanura. Abo bicaranye n'abantu batumva ururimi mugerageze mubabwire ibyo turi kuvuga, ndetse n'abantu bacu baza kuvuga baragerageza kuvanga indimi zose. Muri uyu mwanya reka twakire Maître Innocent Nteziryayo, ni umunyamategeko, yabaye umucamanza cyangwa umuprocureur, umuprosecutor, ariko ubu ngubu akaba ahagarariye collectif des avocats y'abavictime b'Abanyamulenge, Abahema n'Abatutsi. Karibu cyane Maître Innocent.
Biragoye gutanga message muri iki cyicaro kimeze gutya n'amarira twahaboneye, ariko batubwiye ko kuvuga ari bimwe bituma dukira ihungabana. Kubera amasaha mfite pressure nyinshi cyane, sinzi kujya nateguye ndi bubashe kubibona, ariko ragenda babinyuzaho, ndabizeza ko ntarenza umunota bampaye, ibindi turakomeza ibiganiro. Reka ntangire nihanganishe abacikacumu bagatumba, abacikacumu b'Abanyamulenge mu bwicanyi bwabaye mbere. Mwumvise Professor ukuntu yabisobanuye, yadushizemo indi challenge yo gusubira inyuma tugakora collection y'ibyabaye byose nabyo bigashikirizwa inkiko. Ubwo harimo izayibogobogo n'ahandi bitarashikirizwa inkiko. Ngo kuri update ndabibwira ko kuva 2017 kubufatanye cyane cyane n'umuryango Mahoro Peace Association kugeza n'uyu munsi nta byabaye bitari mu nkiko ku isi, mu nkiko mpuzamahanga. N'ejo twariyo Ilahe, n'ibya Gatumba ku bufatanye bw'uyu muryango ndetse na JRSF n'imiryango migari y'Abanyamulenge gakondo, tumaze kubigeza ahantu hatandukanye, biri documente neza mu buryo bwiza. Rero reka mbasaba gusa bashiraho aga slide singasoma, muragenda mukanyuzaho gusa akora nateguye kugira ngo duhite dukomeza mu minota itarenze bampaye ndabashoje turakomeza nyuma. Murabona ko babivuze bya Gatumba simbisubiramo ni byabaye n'uburyo byabaye documented, uburyo byanditswe na n'isi yose muzi, guhera aha muri hari icyicaro cya Nations Unies, imiryango mpuzamahanga y'isi yose yarabivuze, kugeza na buri gihugu cyose ku itariki 14, 15 kugeza ku itariki ya 20 z'ukwezi kwa 8 barimo bandika amarorerwa abaye Gatumba banasaba ko ashikirizwa inkiko. Komeza. Bimwe mu bimenyetso ni izo ma resolution yavuyemo y'ibyo bihugu agaragaza ibyabaye. Babisobanuye byose n'abahamya babivuze, sinkomeza kubisubiramo kugira ngo nubahirize umwanya. Ikurikiyeho narugenda mbasomera resolution n'igihe yavuzwe n'igihe cyakozwe, ariko ni za UN, za Security Council, za Human Rights Watch, ibi bishoboka byose bakoze amadocumentation ku byabaye ku bwicanyi bwakorewe abacu mu Gatumba. Ariko rero birongera binasaba responsabilité cyangwa se ababikoze birabagaragaza. Kuva umunsi wa mbere mwabonye mwumvise statement ya nyakubahwa Vice President wa Congo Azarias igihe yahageze, yavuze ko abicanyi bavuye muri Congo. Hari ubufatanye hagati y'abicanyi bavuye muri Congo, abari mu Burundi n'intera hamwe zari zarakoze genocide mu Rwanda, bose ku mugambi wo kurimbura abanyamurenge. Rero abibaza tese ni genocide niki, harimo amategeko abivuga, amategeko yashyizwe Convention de Genève igihe ubwicanyi bw'abayahudi bwabaye, baravuze genocide. Ijambo genocide, umuhanga witwa Raphael aravuga ngo genocide ni umugambi, ikubiye gusa umugambi wo kurimbura abantu ubaziza uko bavutse, uko baremwe, uko bisa. Niho itaniye ubundi bwicanyi. Kugutema ni kimwe, shobora kugutema ariko nta mugambi wo kubarimbura uko musa. Ariko ijambo rikubiyemo genocide ni intent cyangwa se intention, umugambi wo kurimbura abantu, idini cyangwa se abanyamurenge, reka nibo turi kuvuga ubaziza uko baremwe. Kubera ko mu Gatumba bari kumwe n'abandi babasanga muri tente yabo. Rero nzasaba buri gihe ko twebwe ntituri abacamanza ngo dutange qualification, ariko twebwe nk'abasaba ubutabera tujye tuvuga ko ari genocide. Twebwe tujye tubyisabira tuvuge ko ari genocide. Urukiko ni rwicara rukavuga ngo si genocide rwa twagize, icyo gihe tuzafata icyo urukiko rwemeje tunakijuririre. Ariko twebwe abasaba tuzadureka mu gukomeza guca iruhande dutambikiriza ngo ese ni massacre, ngo ese ni crime contre l'humanité, ngo ese ni, twebwe tuzadusaba buri munsi ngo ni genocide yakorewe abanyamurenge mu Gatumba. Kuko ndibuka ubushize hari abaza bashatse gutanga urwibutso ahantu hamwe, wenda simpavuga kubera impamvu z'umutekano, banga kurutanga kubera ko twanze ngo ntibandikeho ikindi kitari genocide. Muri UK twaranze turwandikaho ibuye turavuga ngo ni genocide. Ni amateka tutagomba gusibya twebwe ubwacu, tugomba kuyandika tukayasaba gutyo. Igihe UN cyangwa se inkiko zizaza zidasanzwe zigahindura, icyo gihe nibisaba ko duhindura tuzahindura. Komeza. Rero tukibaza ngo se ni ziye option dufite mu mategeko zaduha ubutabera. Ubutabera iki ni kimwe dufitiye, ni option ya mbere ni ngiyi yo kwibuka. Iyi ni ituma memoire zacu zikomeza zitekereza ko byatubayeho. Option ya kabiri ni ukugana inkiko. Kugana inkiko twari dufite option ya mbere bwari Burundi. niho ibyaha byabereye, kubera ko amategeko ateganya ko aho icyaha cyabereye niho haba hari ibimenyetso biri fresh, niho abantu batuye baba bahungabanye, hakaba ari bwo bwa mbere bwagombaga guha abanyamurenge ubutabera, ariko ntibyakunze. Option ya kabiri kwari gufata Kongo, igihugu abiciwe bavuyemo ndetse n'abicanyi baturutsemo, ariko nayo murabibona ko itigeze igira icyo bikoraho. Iya gatatu, kuko iyi CPI mwumva igira ngo principe yayo bitwa ngo principe de complémentarité, donc igomba kubanza kurangiza imihango y'inkiko ziri loko mukabona kuja mu nkiko mpuzamahanga. Iyo rero nayo bwari uburyo bwa gatatu, ariko kubera Burundi ibyago twagize bikomeye, Burundi bwaratifye iriya statut ya Rome mu kwezi kubanziri nyuma tumaze ubwicanyi mu kwa 9, ubwicanyi bwabaye mu kwa 8. Ico gihe rero kubera ko bidasubira inyuma, Burundi nkeretse bubwisabiye ubwabo bahise butakaza agaciro ko CPI itayangaje directement ku Burundi, kubera ko rwasinya amasezerano rukiko nyuma y'uko ubwicanyi buha. Ngira ngo ico kibazo kunda kubazwa cyane, ngira ngo tugitangeho umuco. Noneho na nyuma yabwo 2015 ejo bundi burongera buvamo muri CPI, ubu ntabwo burimo. Igisigaye ku Burundi nubushake bushobora kugera bwonyine ubwabo ukavuga ngo twebwe turaja muri CPI dukurikirana ibi byaha cyangwa se bukurikirana abakoze ayo mahano, ariko Burundi ntibwabikoze. Kongo iyo irabyujuje, abicanyi bavuye muri Kongo baza kwica abanyamurenge mu Gatumba, abo bicanyi baracari muri Kongo iyo CPI n'ibyo tegeko twakoresheje tujana ikirego muri CPI dushingiye kuri Kongo, kuko abicanyi bari bavuye muri Kongo kugira ngo bakurikirane. Twongera rero kugishikiriza Kongo ubwayo tiyagira icikora, turangije tuja muri CPI kiriyo ku itariki ngira ngo ya mbere yo kwa 8 2004 nubwo byagezeyo. Ariko na mbere yaho sukogwa no yarabikoze, hari n'imihango yari yarakozwe n'abapapa banoge hano n'aba metero n'abanyarugabo nabo basaba ubutabera, ariko dutegereza amaperereza twebwe dunono twifata gufata amaperereza twirirwaga dukora amatemonyage na bamwe mu bacika cumu bari hano n'ahandi. Ica nyuma ni Security Council. Security Council nayo irashobora kuregera CPI igasaba procureur ko akora amaperereza, twarayiregeye nayo twarayisabye kugira ngo ikorezwe nayo ntirabikora. Rero asigaye ni ugukomeza twibutsa, dukomeza dukora documentation, dukomeza dushaka ibimenyetso, dukomeza n'amalobi politiki, kuko n'ubushake bwa politiki gusa bubuze kugira ngo ibi byaha bikurikiranwe, naho ibimenyetso byose bishoboka byashikirijwe ubukiko. Rero reka soze mbabwira ngo uyu munsi hariho imbogamizi ikomeye cyane cyane ku Burundi, mwabonye kubibutseho batigeze baho uburenganzira bibuka kwibuka, ariko amarira yaririwe hano, amarira y'abatangabuhamya twumvise hano ntabwo afite umupaka, nta na rimwe azabuza ku butabera buboneka. Ubutabera buri muri twe, ntibizatuma ko Uburundi bwanga ko twibuka tuja gushira imva ku mirambo yacu, tutuzuriye isale ngo tuyuzure ku isi hose ngo twibuke. Ibyo ntibizatuma, kandi nta gahora gahanze bizahinduka. Nkaba mbizeza ko iyi challenge twahawe n'uyu mugabo ku bufatanye namwe kandi imiryango iri hano, ibyabaye muri Bzura za Force Commune za Bibogobogo tuzaterane hano naho tuvuga ko nabyo twabikoreye documentation ijanye n'amategeko nabyo byashikirijwe inkiko. Murakoze cyane.
arakoze cyane Maître Innocent kutubwira aho ibikorwa by'ubutabera bigeze. Muri uyu mwanya nagira ntumire President wa Mahoro Peace Association, President Douglas Kabunda, kugira ngo tugezeho ijambo duteguriye. Karibu cyane President.
Mwiriwe, murakoze, amasaha yagiye, dusigaranye amasaha makeya ariko mutwihanganire kandi mwihangane kubera ko tugifite umushyitsi mukuru uza kutugezaho ijambo. Icyambere reka mbashimire mwese kuba mwabonye umwanya wo kuza kwizihiza ino seremoni yo kwibuka abacu, abari hano, abakoreye uno muhango mu bindi bihugu, turabashimiye rwose kuri ico gikorwa kandi turabashimiye kuba mwakomeje kwihangana mwagize ituzo amasaha kubera yabaye nka menshi, turabashimiye rwose. Reka dufate umwanya wo gushimira umuryango wa GRSF kuri ino gahunda bakomeje gukora buri mwaka. Ni gahunda nziza tugomba gushigikira twese ku isi kuko iduheza opportunity yo kuguma kwibuka abacu kandi no kuguma gushiraho pressure kugira ngo tuzabone ubutabera Maître Innocent ahatubwira. Reka dushimire umuhana wa Columbus, MPA Columbus, uyobowe na President James kuri ino organisation kuba mwaremeye kuduhostinga uno munsi wa none kandi mwakoze akazi keza, programme mwayipanze neza, team yawe yose ya MPA Columbus turabashimiye kuri no event mwateguye neza cyane, turabashimiye. Reka nanje mfata umwanya wo gutanga pole ku muryango, ku banyamurenge bose ku isi, pole ku barescape, famille z'abarescape zo mu Gatumba, famille z'abarescape z'abanyamurenge bose bapfiriye mu bice bitandukanye by'igihugu cyacu cya Congo. Mwihangane, nubwo ibibazo bitararangira, nubwo ubwicanyi butarahagaraka, ariko mukomeze kwihana kuko umunsi umwe amahoro azagaruka iwacu. Rero munyihanganire kandi munyemerere ijambo ryanje ndivuge mu Cyongereza kubera ko dushaka ko urubyiruko rwacu rwose ruri hano ruryumva. Abanyamahanga tuzatwirirwa turirira nabo baryumve muri integrite yarwo. Ngerago opportunity yo gukora plaidoyer igihe tuhatwibuka titugomba kwireka. Distinguished guests, Honorable Senator Hatchet Greg, Your Excellency Dr. Freddy Kanyiki, Pastor Paul Musafiri, Maître Innocent, various community leaders in this room, pastors, faith leaders, our youth, representative of partners organization, friends of Abanyamulenge, thank you for being here with us. We appreciate your presence. On behalf of Mahoro Peace Association, the Abanyamulenge community here in America, I extend our deepest gratitude to everyone who made this memorable possible. To all our attendees, partners, volunteers, and families, your presence matters. When a community gathers to remember its dead, the presence of others says that your pain is seen, your history matters, you do not mourn alone. So before I speak further, allow me to begin with a tribute, not to a statistic, not to a number, but to a life. This is the story of a young man. He was 16 years old, charismatic, bright, the kind of student who always topped his class. A young man whose teachers believed he would one day change the world. A Christian boy who took his faith very seriously, that even his own mother says, "This child loves God with a depth that frightens me." He was a choir leader, not only in school activities, but in life as well. He lifted others. He encouraged his friends. He carried joy with discipline and discipline with joy. Throughout last week's survivor's testimony, his name kept rising up, whispered with love, remembered with tears. He was a friend to many in this room. He was a son. He was a brother. He was a dream in motion. He was a Congolese Mnyamulenge. He was killed because he was Mnyamulenge, because of an identity that he did not choose, but carried with pride. Because of hatred that saw his ethnicity before it saw his humanity. Because of a genocidal ideology that targeted Banyamulenge, the future of our people. His name is Askof Gishoma, the son of Elisha Gishoma, and he was my brother-in-law. You see, Askof stands today as the face of all Banyamulenge youth we lost, the boys and girls whose future was stolen, whose potential was extinguished, whose dreams were interrupted before they could bloom. Askof represents every young Banyamulenge child who died in Gatumba, every youth taken in Biwogowogo, every teenager lost in Vura, every son, daughter killed in Kalemi, Lubumbashi, and Bujimai. He represents the generation that never got to grow up, the generation killed for who they are. And today we honor him, and through him, we honor them all. To the families of 166 Banyamulenge refugees murdered in Gatumba, we mourn you. To the survivors, we stand with you. To every Banyamulenge family that has lost a loved one throughout violence and persecution, we extend our deepest sympathy. Your grief is our grief. Your loss is our loss. Your memory is our memory. 22 years after Gatumba, our people are still under attack. In Minembwe today, the genocide continues in a very slow motion. Villages are burned, livestock are stolen, families are displaced, children hiding under the bush, drone strikes targeting civilians. A humanitarian blockade starving entire communities. Hate speech and dehumanization spread unchecked. The world may call it conflict, but we know what it is. A continuation of the same genocide ideology that killed Askof, that killed our youth, that killed our families. Gatumba was not the end. It was a warning. And today, that warning is unfolding in Minembwe as we speak. To all Banyamulenge youth, you are the generation that must carry the memory into action. You must be present, you must be consistent, and you must be engaged. Do not wait for others to define your story. Do not wait for others to define your people. Do not wait for others to build your future. You are the future, you are the voice, and you are the solution. To our community at large, we must act. We must organize. We must advocate. We must support. We cannot outsource our survival. We cannot outsource our dignity. We cannot outsource our future. And this is the message to the international community. We remind you of your responsibilities today. You promised never again. Yet today, in Minembwe, civilians are dying, children are starving, families are displaced, communities are under siege. We call on to you to act, not with statements, not with symbolic gestures, but with concrete protection, accountability, and human access. Gatumba happened under your watch. Minembwe is happening under your watch. Your responsibility did not end in 2004. It continues today. To the victims of Gatumba, to the youth we lost, to Askof Gishoma, to every Banyamulenge life taken by violence, we remember you. Twibuke Gatumba, twibuke abacu, twibuke kugira ngo amateka atazibagirana, kandi kugira ngo amahoro nkaya azongere kubaho. Murakoze cyane.
Thank you so much, President Douglas. In this moment, please help me welcome His Excellency Dr. Fredi Kaniki, a Congolese American. He's a pharmacist, a public health scientist, an educator, and a political leader. For more than 2 decades, he has served communities in both the United States, the DRC, and the United States. His life is marked by successful professional career, but also by a calling. His deepest calling lies beyond his professional achievements. In 1996, his father and 2 younger brothers were brutally killed because of who they were. Rather than hardening his heart, that loss gave him a mission to help ensure Congo's future is never again shaped by hatred, exclusion, and violence. Today, Dr. Fredi Kaniki has dedicated himself to the pursuit of lasting peace in Congo. At the heart of his vision are 2 words, le vivre ensemble, living together, a firm belief that all Congolese, regardless of ethnicity, region, or background, have a right to live together in dignity, security, equality, and prosperity. He dreams of a Congo where diversity is no longer feared, but embraced as a strength. A Congo where every child can inherit a future defined not by division, by peace, dignity, and hope. Ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome Dr. Fredi Kaniki.
Ndabihanganisha mwese muri uyu mugoroba, twihangane ibyatubayeho ntabwo ari byo bizagena kazoza kacu. Ndabashimira kuntumira muri uyu muhango, muri uyu mwaka. Mu yindi myaka ishize nakomeje kuba mu bindi bihugu bitandukanye muri uyu muhango, ariko uyu mwaka ndabashimira kuba nagarutse hano kuza kubana namwe. Ndabashimira gukomeza kwibuka abacu, tubibuke twiremamwo inshingano. Igikomeye tuzakura muri uku kwibuka ni ukwiyubaka ku giti cacu individuellement. Buri mucikacumu wese uri hano, kandi iyo mvuga umucikacumu kuri njyewe umunyamurenge wese ni umucikacumu. Uwapfuye yapfuye urupfu nashoboraga gupfa n'undi yashoboraga gupfa. Umucikacumu wese amenye ko inshingano za mbere dukura muri uku kwibuka nuko twiyubaka ku giti cacu b'umugabo. Ubwoko buzakomera kuko bufite abakomeye muri bo. Nuba umugabo ku giti cawe, uzaba uri kumbera umugabo, uzaba uri kunyubaka, uzaba uri kurema ubwoko, uzaba uri kubukura kuri cacavu ubwicazanya n'abakomeye. Ariko kandi kwibuka kuzaturememwo kwiyubaka collectively nk'ubwoko. Ubu butabera dusaba, impamvu butaratugeraho, suko nta kuri dufite, nuko tutaragera ku rwego bagomba kutwubaha babuduhe. Duhaguruke tuba abagabo. Ibyo dukeneye tuzabyihesha. Inshingano z'ubutabera ku bwicanyi bwatubayeho ziturimwo kurusha uko ziri ku isi ku bandi. Ariko kandi n'inshingano zo kurema kazoza ku bana bacu n'abuzukuru bacu, kugira ngo hatagira uwundi uzabaho mu buzima twabayeho. Amarira twarize abana bacu ntibakayarire, abuzukuru bacu ntibakayarire. Ibyo biri mu nshingano zacu, njewe nawe. Ndaza kuvuga mu Cyongereza kubera ko ibyo dufite kubwira isi ni byinshi kuruta ibyo dufite kubwirana. Ariko mu magambo makeya tubanze twumvikane kuri aya magambo, ko uko twibuka dutahe twiremamwo imbaraga zo kwiyubaka, kugira ngo ejo tutazirirwa twiruka dusaba, ahubwo ibyo dukeneye bazabidusangisha kubera ko twakomeye, twabaye abagabo. Ndavuga bikeya ariko ndabizi ko mwumva cyane. Ikindi ndashaka kubasezeranya ko turi kumwe. Icyadukuye hano kikatujana hariya no kugira ngo tutazongera kurira nkuko. No kugira ngo natwe tuzabeho kuko abandi babaho. No kugira ngo isi ntikazatwibuke kubera imbabazi, kuko ntayigira. No kugira ngo turemere akazoza abadukomokaho. Murakoze cyane, Imana ibahe umugisha. As we commemorate for the 22nd time the Gatumba genocide against the Banyamulenge that happened in Burundi on the night of the 13th, giving in the 14th of August in 2004. The theme of this year is remembering the victims, defending dignity, demanding justice, and defeating genocidal ideology. We remember not to reopen the door of hatred, but to close the road to repetition. We demand justice, not as a revenge, but as a foundation for long-lasting peace. We use memory as a political and moral duty to all of us. Dear survivors, distinguished guests, today we gather with grief, with reverence, and with determination. 22 years have passed since that night of August 13th, 2004, when the Banyamulenge refugees at Gatumba, who had fled persecution in eastern DRC, were attacked in a camp in which they came seeking safety. 166 of them were killed. More than 100 people were wounded and others disappeared. Women, children, elderly people, entire families were burned and or slaughtered because of who they were. Today, 22 years later, we remember every one of them by name. We refuse to think of them as numbers, as statistics, because every life was a brother, was a sister, was a son, was a mother, was a father. We remember children who never had the opportunity to grow up to their God-given potential. We remember mothers who never returned to their families. We remember fathers whose children waited for them in vain. We remember the elderly whose lives were taken rather than protected. We remember the wounded, we remember the missing, and we remember the survivors who have carried this pain for 22 long years. 22 years means that there is an entire generation that has grown up asking a simple question: when will justice be served? When will justice be done? And our answer today must be very clear and with no ambiguity. Justice must not be abandoned because time has passed. Because time does not erase the crime. Time does not erase the names of the victims. Time does not make the dead less important. And time cannot transform impunity into justice. 22 years are enough. However, let me also be clear on something. We demand justice, not as a revenge, but as a foundation for peace. Justice is accountability. Gatumba must be remembered truthfully. Gatumba was not an accident of history. It was a deliberate act, an attack against a targeted community. The victims were identified and targeted as Banyamulenge. Testimonies documented threats and slogans against the Banyamulenge, calling for the Banyamulenge to be killed and to be prevented from returning to the DRC. United Nations investigations documented the ethnic and political dimensions of the attack. FNL Palpehutu publicly claimed responsibility at a time. How can the principle of presumption of innocence be invoked in circumstances where individuals themselves have publicly acknowledged responsibility for the act in question? Other allegations concerning the support from other armed groups and Mai are yet to receive a full, complete, independent, and credible judicial examination that the survivors and the family deserve. And that is precisely why we continue to call for accountability based on evidence and law. We must be able to say clearly what we know, acknowledge what remains to be established, and demand that the unanswered questions be investigated. For the Banyamulenge community, Gatumba wears an essential characteristic of a genocidal crime. A community was deliberately identified, dehumanized, and attacked because of its identity, with the apparent and obvious intent to destroy members of that community. We therefore continue to call for the gravity, the intent, the historical meaning of Gatumba to be examined fully and judicially. Gatumba did not begin in Gatumba. My brother Paul Musafiri refused to start his remembrance and his memory on the night of the Gatumba. He researched the mass grave and proceeded to the dignified inhumation for the families to be comforted. In 1996, I couldn't bury my loved ones. I lost my father and my brothers, 3 brothers, in one night, the night of September 22nd, 1996. I did not get a chance to bury them. I still don't know where lays their bones and remains. Allow me to read you just a chapter of my book. I went in December of 1996, trying to see if I can find where they were buried. Once I disembarked from the bus, after a 7-hour journey, I searched out and found the building in which the captives had been confined, which even 3 months after the carnage had not been cleaned. I doubt anyone had ever even entered the room. It was like those haunted, forbidden places where no one dares to go. It was dark when I first entered, reeking of death, with a canopy of spider webs draping from the ceiling and the corners. I entered alone. The young man who showed me the room immediately went back as a sign to warn me not to go in. But I had no choice. I had been on the road almost the entire day, hours just for this. The room was quiet, yet beyond the borders of the eerie silence, from somewhere deep within me, as if from a great distance, I could hear the deafening screams of desperate voices, men, old and young, and boys, their soprano voices like sirens of terror in the airspace. In the shadow of my mind, an ancient scripture voiced itself within my mind, almost catatonic with shock and disbelief. I spare you with the scripture. The floor was covered in obscene washes of blood, as were the walls. I watched in my mind involuntarily recreating the brutal savagery of the aftermath I gazed upon, empty of all life, feeling, and I was numb. I did not cry. And although I was there in body, I was absent in spirit, for I simply could not take the full extent of its horror into my being. Blood was everywhere, sticking and smearing over the walls, floors, and doors. Reckless splashes of blood and desperate scarlet handprints, mute evidence of the attempt of the doomed to somehow escape their death chamber. Again, I felt almost marveled at the same curious detachment that had invaded my being since the first learning of my family's fate. I did not get a chance to bury them. The story of Gatumba represents an entire history of people, of a community that started long time before we existed. To understand why Gatumba remained so important, we must understand that the massacre did not emerge from nowhere. For generations, Banyamulenge and other Congolese Tutsi communities have faced questions about whether they truly belong in the country of their ancestors. And here it's important to know that Congo became Congo and was given limits and borders after we lived for centuries in what was to become Congo. The question of Banyamulenge citizenship is not a matter of debate. There are so many legal documents, including the Constitution, that affirm and recognize their status as Congolese citizens by nationality of origin, but this issue has often and repeatedly been used as a political weapon. Communities were described as foreigners. Their belonging was challenged. Their belonging to the Congolese society was challenged. Their political participation was restricted. And I can go on and on. The lesson is that dehumanizing and exclusion create conditions in which violence becomes possible. First, community is told it does not belong. Then its citizenship is questioned. Then its members are described as dangerous, foreigners, criminals, disloyal. Then violence becomes easier to justify. And finally, when victims resist or survive, they can be blamed for the violence committed against them. We have seen this recipe produce the same results over and over, and yet we continue to say never again. Genocide and mass atrocities do not begin when the first bullet is fired. They begin much earlier, when a society is taught to see part of its population as less human. Genocide begins with words, with perceptions. Congolese Tutsi have been described with dehumanizing words, dehumanizing language, including being called snakes, cockroaches, invaders, infiltrators, poison. Such language should never be treated as harmless political rhetoric. Words can identify targets. Words can remove moral restraint. Words can encourage betrayers. And words can make violence look patriotic or necessary. We therefore call upon media institutions, civil societies, governments, diplomatic missions, international organizations, and digital platforms to take systematic hate speech very, very seriously. And let me just say too, Gatumba did not end in Gatumba. The story of Gatumba does not end with the burial of the dead. In the years that followed, Banyamulenge and other Congolese Tutsi communities continued to experience killings, displacement, looting of their livestock, destruction of their homes and villages, sexual violence, arbitrary detention, and other forms of abuse. From Uvira and Fizi to the Haut Plateau and Minembwe, families have been uprooted, livelihoods destroyed, and civilians placed in situation of profound insecurity. We remember the victims of Gatumba, but we also remember those killed afterwards. We remember those killed in places such as Masisi, Minembwe, Bijombo, Mikenke, Mudende, Kamombo, and elsewhere. We remember those lynched in cities like Goma, Lueba, Kalima. We remember those who were killed while displaced and those whose names never made it to an international report. Every life has equal dignity. Every victim deserves to be remembered. And every credible allegation of a serious crime deserves to be investigated. We will not answer persecution with hatred. Today, we must also speak honestly about the present. It is true that Banyamulenge community continue to face serious concerns about discrimination, insecurity, political exclusion, hate speech, and the failure of institutions to provide protection, and equal protection, I meant. And we ask governments and international actors to examine these concerns seriously and independently. But we also must be clear, our accusation is not against an entire people. We do not blame every Congolese person for the crimes committed against the Banyamulenge. We do not seek the destruction of another community. We do not seek revenge. We seek protection. We seek equality. We seek the right to live as Congolese citizens without having to repeatedly prove that we belong. The dignity we demand for the Banyamulenge must be the dignity we recognize in every other Congolese community. Justice that produces hatred is not justice. Liberation that humiliates another community is not liberation. And a peaceful Congo cannot be built by replacing one form of collective discrimination by another form of discrimination. That is not what we are asking for. We are asking for justice. And I believe this is not too much asking. 22 years of impunity is too long. 22 years after Gatumba, one of the deepest wounds remains the absence of a complete and credible judicial process. Survivors have carried their memories for 22 years. Families have carried their grief. Evidence has aged. Evidence has aged, but also witnesses have died. And the political calculations have too often prevailed over the demand for justice. This cannot continue indefinitely. Although these crimes are not subject to a statute of limitation, justice should not be delayed indefinitely. It would be deeply, deeply unjust for those responsible for the Gatumba massacre to die of natural causes without ever being held accountable for their actions. What we ask of the international community, to the United Nations, the African Union, the European Union, the East African Community, the governments of the Great Lake regions, the international judicial institutions, human rights organizations, and all those committed to preventing mass atrocities, do not allow protection of minority to become negotiable because defending them is politically inconvenient. I will repeat this. Do not allow the protection of the minority to become negotiable because defending them is politically inconvenient. Do not condemn hate speech in principle while ignoring it when it becomes politically useful. To the government of the United States, we recognize and appreciate your strong engagement in search for peace in the Democratic Republic of Congo. We welcome the diplomatic efforts represented by the Washington Accords and the Doha peace process. We also recognize that the United States possesses significant diplomatic influence when it's used in fairness and in a neutral and impartial way. That is why we call upon the US government to use its diplomatic leverage to assure that the pursuit of peace does not come to the expense of justice. A lasting peace cannot be built by asking victims to forget while perpetrators remain beyond the reach of the law. We ask for three few things: the truth be told, justice be served, and protection be guaranteed. To our survivors, families, and youth, your wounds have not been forgotten, your courage has not been invisible. Your loved ones belong to our collective memory. We know we cannot bring them back, but we can refuse to allow their names to disappear. Learn this history, preserve it accurately, study it, teach it, but carry it without hatred. Let memory give you discipline, education, unity, and service, not revenge. Do not allow our suffering to become an inheritance of hatred. Let it become an inheritance of responsibility. We also recognize that peace is not sustainable by goodwill alone. It requires the capacity to defend life and dignity. No community can remain permanently vulnerable and expect lasting safety. The responsibility to protect our people, our rights, and our future is essential foundation of any durable peace. Twirwaneho. And to our brothers and sisters in Minembwe and elsewhere throughout the diaspora, remain united, protect the vulnerable, reject division that weaken our ability to defend life and pursue justice. And to all Congolese who reject ethnic hatred, the struggle is also yours. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, by Martin Luther King Jr. When you are a man or a woman of value, like my brother Paul Musafiri, you recognize the pain of one community, like the one we are describing today of the Banyamulenge, is a wound in the conscience of the entire Congolese nation. If citizenship can be taken from one community, another community will become vulnerable tomorrow. If ethnic hatred is tolerated against one group, it eventually weakens the protection of all. Let us therefore build a Congo where diversity is protected by law, where diversity is seen as a strength, not as a source of division, where political disagreement does not become ethnic persecution. From remembrance to responsibility, as we mark the 22nd commemoration of Gatumba, we do more than mourning. We remind ourselves that we will remember the 166 victims as people, not as numbers. We will defend the truth against denial. We will pursue justice through evidence and law. We will protect life and dignity when institutions fail. We will demand a political order in which security is guaranteed by rights rather than purchased through permanent fear. We will refuse to allow our pain to turn in against the humanity of others. We will not disappear. We will not surrender our identity. We will not apologize for our existence, but neither will we surrender our humanity to hatred. May the memory of the victims strengthen our courage. May the resilience of the survivors guide our conscience. May the truth of Gatumba be preserved. May justice finally reach those who have waited 22 long years. And may the people of Minembwe and all community of Eastern Congo one day live in a peace secured not by fear, but by rights, by accountability, by equal citizenship, and by the rule of law. God bless all the survivors, the families of the victims, and God bless all those who labor for peace and justice all around the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, our keynote speaker, His Excellency Dr. Freddy Kaniki. We're about to conclude our session, our first session, but let me say a few words before we conclude. As we conclude this session, I would like first to apologize because of the change in schedule. We've delayed, we're like almost an hour behind our scheduled time to finish this first session. This is due to wanting to give time to the survivors to express themselves, to hear their testimonies today, and honor the memory of their loved ones, without rushing them so that, you know, this is their day. This is a sacred day for them. It's a day for them to remember their loved ones. And because of this, we're going to change the schedule a little bit. We're going to have a panel discussion at the next venue, which will be told to us by President James Ndatabaye in a few minutes. So I would like to ask everyone to not leave. We are not done yet. We're going to have a second session where we'll hear more from our speakers today. There will be our panelists as well. We have time to ask them questions if time allows. And we will we'll also share a meal. There will be lunch. And I would like to invite at this moment President James Ndatabaye to give us more instructions about how to get to the next venue and the address as well. As he's coming, let me remind everyone, as we are going to be departing here, we'll close with a prayer. I would like everybody to go straight to your cars and go to the next venue because we don't want to stay in the hallways. We have limited time to be in this place, and I don't want us to abuse the time and the generosity of the host here.
Thank you so much. Turashimira abantu bavuye kutwihanganisha ndetse namwe mwese mwitabiriye mwagize neza. Ibi nibyo bigaragaza gusubiza abacu agaciro bambuwe ndetse no guharanira gukomeza gushakisha ibyo twatswe. Turabasaba kuko twitabiriye hano, turabatumira kugira ngo abantu bari kugenda mwihangane mureke gusakuza kugira ngo dusoze nkuko
Amakuba impande zose bwoko bwanjye munanijwe
ariko hamwe n'ako gahinda twumvise ijambo ryawe ko uba uri kumwe natwe kandi udutegurira ibyiza biri imbere dukomeje kukwizera dukomeje kukwiringira kuko ntuhinduka ijambo ryatubwiye ngo uri hafi y'abafite imitima ibabaye imitima imenetse imitima yuzuye agahinda uyiri hafi ijambo ryawe ryatubwiye kuri se w'imfubyi ukaba n'umuvugizi w'abadafite kivugira amahanga ntiyatuvugira ariko wowe ubwawe uri umuvugizi wacu kandi uri n'umurengezi wacu tuguhanze amaso kugira ngo ugaragaze ubutabera bukwiriye ugaragaza umutekano utanga amahoro aho akwiriye kuba ari kandi natwe turayakeneye umugisha buri wese wabaye aha umugisha ubwoko bwacu nabwo bugirire neza utwibuke mwami ntutwirengagize tuzi ko gusenga kwacu kuza kugera imbere yawe turindiriye ku museke utambika izuba ryo gukiranuka reka turasira tugiye mu yindi mihango nanone ukomeze ubane natwe ikiganza cyawe cyiza gikomeze kitubeho niko tubisenze mu izina rya Yesu umwami n'umukiza wacu amen.
Mwakoze cyane duhurire hariya twese hakurikira
tuzabona intwari z'imurenge zishwe zizira uko zaremwe